And we're starting
Excellent.
streaming. All right.
Even more
So I believe we're live
excellent.
now, everybody. Hello, lords and ladies of the internet. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to today's stream. Today, we're going to be talking about designing your own post-apocalypse and some of the more famous post-apocalypse out there. Before we get started, I should introduce my panel of guests. First here, and the first link in the description, is to our friend here, Pag. He's been on here several times before. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your expertise, and what the link in the description is to?
The link in the description is to my book series, my 3 books that are out. And as that might imply, I am an author. I write books. Funny story, actually, about this. The setting that I write these books within is a tabletop setting. And that tabletop setting actually started as an apocalyptic setting. The very first sessions I ever ran of the setting that would eventually snowball into my game. We're all a like crazy zombie apocalypse, like a crazy techno zombie apocalypse. Um, so yeah, just kind of a funny little coincidence, a little quinky dink there.
Oh, so you got a lot of experience and passion with this sort of thing.
Oh yeah, I love the whole post apocalypse, and in fact, a couple of my favorite novels like ever written, The Stand and I think it's called the Ascension. I can't remember the name of the second one. Are both post-apocalypse novels. They're both fantastic, great pieces of work. I think there's a lot of rich storytelling potential in the end of the world, which is probably why a lot of people do it.
I agree, and I can't wait to dive into some of that expertise here today. So next up, Mr. Pops, you've been on here several times. You're our animal expert. What would you like to tell the people about, sir?
Sure. So
While the peacock attacks your car.
oh no, he's very lovely. I like him. His name is Costello. He's a good boy. He just he gets a little bold sometimes. Ever since we let him free range, but it's okay. So anyway, as always, the loyal listeners know me. I'm Pops. I'd say I've been a fan of post-apocalyptic stories since probably as long as since I discovered them. I think it's a really great genre. I would say the reasons I like it is because, especially if you're creating this world and you're looking at other creators that have done it, I say it allows you to draw from pretty much every single facet, every little corner of human imagination. It's like endless possibilities. I'd say something I especially love would be that you can use it pretty much as a backdrop for any type of story, whatever theme, whatever message you want to do, whether it's everything from adventure stories to horror stories to sci-fi stories, and I mean even comedy or a mix of all the above. So I'd say we're going to be getting into all that and more. As always, I'm very happy to be here and be part of the discussion. One thing though, before we get started, I want to mention, because I know it'll come up whether I mention it now or whether someone else mentions it later. It is pronounced nuclear, not nuclear. Okay.
Nuclear.
Yep.
Somebody pointed that out to me one time, that I think in the old Christopher Reeves, Superman 2, Gene Hackman pronounces nuclear as nuclear, and ever since I noticed that, it's been at the back of my mind as a weird little autistic fucking thing that I have as a grammar nerd. So obviously you guys are all going to pronounce it wrong from now on, and I'll have a conniption, and it'll be very entertaining. All right, so
Yep.
let's have some fun, boys. All right, who's next?
Great to pronounce it, nuclear. All right, so next up is our first of our 2 YouTube guests, Astro, who's returning to the podcast. Hello, Astro. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Amazing astronaut reporting in. I thought that was the cue.
Good, buddy.
Well, hello, folks. I like comic books. I like the apocalypse. Depressing, I know.
It's all right. And would you like to tell them what has been linked in the description for you?
The YouTube channel. Subscribe to it, folks. I'll have reviews coming up, and also upcoming surprises and mysteries. Take a look at that community tab.
And subscribe to this man.
Yes. Yeah, let's get Astro some more subscriptions so he can be motivated to make more content. I need more non-Linkara comic book review channels out there.
Yes.
So, with that, let's move to A person I know well who is finally making his first appearance on this podcast. I've made several appearances on podcast. Mr. Blackaroony. Hello,
The
sir.
whitest guy on here.
Don't listen to them. Hello. This is my first time here. I was hoping my first time here to be the Warhammer episode at one point, but post-apocalypse, I like it. I mean, ironically enough, as much as I absolutely love the post-apocalyptic story in fiction, I know only a handful of stories, but those handful of stories, I believe, are very interesting and I think worth exploring. Something I associate a post-apocalypse type story with is kind of like how Japan felt after the end of World War II, which it basically they felt like a very defeated nation, and they had to rebuild. So a post-apocalyptic story, I believe, could explore that, but on a much larger scale. Instead of a defeated nation, how about a defeated civilization? How would that feel like? How would it feel like to know that you're probably among the last humans alive? What led to the collapse of society, and was it out of human greed or uh, human stupidity, or just external forces like aliens and sickness and stuff like that? It's a pretty interesting topic, and a lot of for example, and this is probably going to be mentioned later. Fallout probably explores as well the idea of nation against nation, like the failure of humanity leading to what is essentially the end of the world, and I have to start anew. That I think is pretty interesting. Funny enough, I haven't actually seen Fallout, so yeah.
Well, yeah,
But yeah,
overall, I'd say I agree. And also taking into account certain things like even moral implications of a story when it comes to how you decide to build back the pieces. There's, as always, a million and one possibilities you could do with it. So I agree with that, and we'll be going over that too.
All right, so before we get to our final guest here, there's two things I want to point out. First, hello, Federico. I remember speaking with you on Black Screen a few weeks ago. And second, on the subject of a Warhammer podcast, every time we think about doing one, Games Workshop decides to do something even stupider. And I don't want to talk about a train wreck in the middle of a train wreck. I want to let the train fully collapse so we can count the bodies first. Because, oh boy, do they keep doing stupider and stupider things. And I got a little video coming out actually tomorrow about that. So look forward to that, everybody. But let us get to our final guest here, Mr. Tio. Would you like to tell us about yourself, sir?
Greetings. In terms of my own experience with post-apocalyptic stories, they aren't exactly something that I seek out, but they can be very enjoyable. Of course, there's Fallout. My most recent new experience with a post-apocalyptic story is, I think, unironically, Adventure Time. I only recently saw that.
Spoilers.
Oh, it's just a decade-old show at the decade and a half, something like that. But
Golly, I'm feeling old.
A lot of stories in post-apocalypses, to me, seem to go over a lot of the same themes. So that part itself doesn't interest me, but I do like to see the different worlds. But then, of course, there is the occasional story that will take it in what feels like a very different direction, and I find those very fascinating.
Sure. And for anyone in the audience who hasn't figured it out yet, Tio's whole shtick is that he LARPs as a has-been hotel character.
That's true. Yeah.
He is a cartoon character. It's okay. We love him.
Yeah.
My profile picture is Fawful from Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story. Go play it. Although Alan Green is out of business.
Yeah, if you could find a link to a legal version of the game, we'll put it in the description for you. Because we only support full legality here. I definitely would not advise people to circumvent Nintendo's evil copyright usage.
Absolutely.
So, before we
Support the
fully
official release.
support the official release, especially of my products. So, before we fully dive into the apocalypse thing here, there's another piece of RPG housekeeping I want to talk about. It's not the Warhammer thing. Like I said, I have a video coming out about that tomorrow. I don't want to get into the politics side of it, but something that's really bothered me is there's a channel that I've recently seen called Grim Jim. He has come in my subscriptions probably a week or so ago, and he's one of the guys who originally created Munchkin. You've definitely seen Munchkin. Heck, they sell that game in Target. It's like a super boiled down, card game that's about adventuring, and it's a lot of fun. Apparently, they've never paid him royalties, which I find insane. He said how Jackson Games definitely has raised millions off the game, but you can't prove that because you don't have access to financial statements. But they're supposed to pay him between 2 and 5% for the Munchkin game sales and for anything based on Munchkin game sales. Okay. They recently did a Kickstarter, which last I checked was at over $600,000 for a new version of Munchkin. And they've given him nothing, and they're not going to give him anything. Which I find baffling, because in their Kickstarter, they cite his book specifically as the first version of Munchkin. This is not even like D&D where they just pretend a D&D didn't happen so they don't have to pay Dave Arneson any money. They specifically cited Jim's thing and some of his content creator and friends and other people who worked on it with him, which is weird because, like I said, they're not paying him any royalties, and he's a disabled man now. He doesn't really have the ability to go out and work for a living, and he doesn't have the ability to hire a lawyer because he doesn't make that much off disability. He also refuses to do a Kickstarter because he doesn't believe in kickstarting for legal funds to get him money. So I'm hoping that I can just talk about it here and mention it, so next time you see Jackson Games or any of the products of them, let them know that do right by this guy. Just cut him a check or buy out his contract or something. It's not fair that he could create his heart and soul into a game like Munchkin, which is very well beloved and very popular in the world, and just get screwed out of the money like that. Like, dude shouldn't be living in a trailer on welfare checks because he's disabled. He made a popular game.
Mm-hmm.
That is depressing.
One more time, audience. What's his name?
Grim Jim. I probably should get his channel and link it in the description. But, man. Like I said, it is just tragic what's happening here. And I just couldn't not talk about it. Even in the video that he talked about, he didn't really want people to mention it and go into it, but I'm going to post it here in the chat so people can click on this video. And I'm going to put it in the description once this goes re-uploaded. But yeah, it's just absolute BS. I don't understand how you could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're out there and you think, you want to contribute and help somebody who's a member of the community, not saying you got to shut down your college and run in the streets yelling free Palestine or anything, but, show them some love. Really. Yeah, he's in a tough spot right now and he deserves better. I would say.
Like I said, he's, I know that there's some controversy because he's got some weird takes and stuff. I don't care about that. Put that to the side. He created a piece of art that we enjoy. He deserves to get paid for the art. I don't care what your politics are. You deserve to get paid for the things you make. So I just wanted to talk about that now before we really get into the podcast proper. Thank you all. But let's talk about some post-apocalyptic stuff now, huh?
Hell yeah.
All right, let's get into it.
So I think the step... Oh, go ahead, Astro.
Actually, I want to start with an insane question. What are your opinions on aliens in the post-apocalyptic setting?
That's a great question. I will ask you to save that until after we define what an apocalypse and a post-apocalypse are. Because we probably should talk about what we're... Go ahead.
I'm to read off the Wikipedia article.
If you want to. So there are 3 setting types, I guess, that I want to distinguish from here. An apocalypse, a post-apocalypse, and a post-post-apocalypse. If you want to read off any Wikipedia articles for these, I will let you guys know. By the way, hello, Nebula. Would you like to join us for today's stream, sir?
You jumping in because any issues with the video? Everything good?
No, I was just looking around.
I
just
well,
saw everyone in here.
Welcome to the stream. You ready to talk about the apocalypse with us?
Sure.
All right. This is Nebula. He is a Twitch streamer. He makes some fantastic content. I star in some of his videos. I'm the guy who's dying all the time in Helldivers with him.
Yes, very often.
Every time.
Yes. So, Nebula, if you could send me a link, I'll add it to the description when this VOD goes up, so that way people can go to click your channel.
Yep.
While you're here, those of you in chat, a couple channel updates while Astro pulls up the definitions because he likes to read those. Me and Nebula have been talking about doing a drinking stream for Helldivers where we stream both on my channel and his channel. And every time either I die or he dies, I have to take a shot. Every time that somebody gets $50 in either total donations or a one-time donation, we up the difficulty. So if that's interesting to you, come let us know in the Discord. We're trying to figure out how to get that set up. Maybe get a couple of the streamers involved, but I think it'd be a fun time. So,
Sure.
yeah.
You have to pump your stomach after you were done.
Exactly, yeah. I'm doing shots of water. No, I got hundreds of bottles of random alcohol that's been left here throughout the years, and what a great way to get rid of it.
So you're drinking olive oil.
Exactly.
Your body is no longer 70% water; it's 70% alcohol.
Exactly. And the only other thing is, like I said, there's a video coming out tomorrow. If you haven't checked out Book Club yet, next week we're going to be talking about the King Arthur books. It's been posted in Book Club. There's what I found free legal links to the book if you're in certain places like Canada. And we're going to start with the Sword and the Stone. If people really like it, we'll do the rest of the books after that. If not, we can switch to a different series. So,
Yeah, specifically, it'll be the T.H. White trilogy, I believe.
yes,
Once and Future King.
exactly. It's a good one. All right. So, Mr. Astro, have you pulled up the definition for apocalypse that you wish to share with us today?
Well, I'm not going to read off Wikipedia, but let me just describe off the top of my head.
Sure, this will be
Let's
fun.
see. Humankind normally messes up and causes the end of the world. Sometimes it's an external force, like aliens, or something just falling or from the sky, or some basic element of reality breaking. The world
Exactly.
is ended and the people left have to survive and hopefully try and grow back the world.
That's something I really liked about it. The quote unquote like inciting event can be anything from, a disease, zombies, technology takes over, a natural disaster, everything. There's a million and one ways to set up this backdrop, and that's something I really like about the genre as well. If you can call it a genre,
Oh, definitely. Real quick, fun fact about my lore.
I feel like
because
it
I'm a
is ultimately
VTuber.
a genre. It's like almost like a sword and fantasy counterpart.
Kinda. I'm torn between calling it like a genre or a format, depending on how much of a role it plays.
I'd say it could probably be both.
Yeah. So, Nebula, you were going to tell us a little something about you in your backstory, huh?
Yeah, so I, in my lore, come from another dimension and another Earth, and my Earth is fucked. Like, holy shit.
How is that any different from ours?
We still have video games.
But the entire place is it's an actual barren wasteland with, like, monsters roaming around.
That's the difference between apocalypse and post. Yeah.
Oh, they can't hear him on the
Apparently
stream?
Well, no, I can't hear him.
Really? Unblock him.
You guys hear him?
Yeah.
I hear him.
So Discord. I blame
What?
Discord because Discord is always
That's
to blame.
wild.
Yeah.
Let me try a few things.
All right. Well, I can hear him fine. Well,
Hello?
welcome
Yeah,
back.
yeah, so can I.
We can all hear you fine,
Astro,
so I
can
think
you
it's
hear
on
me?
Astro's end.
Crazy.
Try telling him to DC and reconnect.
Let me try changing some settings.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
while
you might
Astro
have him
works on
muted.
that. Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
While Astro works on that, I'm going to go through the definition of apocalypse according to Google. So, the complete and final destruction of the world, as described in the biblical book of Revelation. That will be important for later. Do note that when we talk about the apocalypse, really there's not a post-apocalypse that can exist if you go by the real definition of apocalypse. However, it's usually turned into a meaning like an intense destruction and a resetting of something. Basically, it's almost all wiped out, but not fully, else if it was fully wiped out, you wouldn't have a story. And then
That's one of the definitions I was looking into today, because technically, like, people can describe a lot of things as like quote unquote apocalyptic, but when you get into what's in the Bible, it's almost called isn't it called like a Armageddon?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's more like a final battle, a final instance where it's like, okay, everything's officially over, versus, what we see with post-apocalyptic stories like Fallout, for example, where, there's stragglers, there's survivors. Maybe it's not religious reasons or anything, but people understand what it means overall. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then building
The
off
Battle
that,
of Armageddon is usually an epilogue. So
yes. And the post-apocalypse I want to get into, this is the things that happen after the apocalypse. This is after the war is done and after all the dust has settled, what survivors have to deal with it. Then you get post-apocalypse, which is usually that setting moved forward a long enough time that the apocalypse has moved into the background. It's no longer the predominant force that's running the world anymore. It's moved on as setting to the point where you can have new stories that are set after, and maybe you're re-achieving the same growth and hubris as what led to the apocalypse. So that should help when you're trying to figure out settings. And the reason this is important is a lot of the best media is mislabeled as post-apocalyptic. A lot of zombie media is not post-apocalyptic. It's actually apocalyptic. It's taking place during the apocalypse. And I do want to get to this chat here from Federico. He asks, do any of us know about the Spec Evo post-apocalyptic work known as Unbroken Kingdom? I don't know any book called Unbroken Kingdom. Do any of you guys?
Nah.
No.
afraid not. I know Unbroken, which is probably just as good as any book I've ever read, but it has nothing to do with post-apocalypse. It's World War II.
Sorry, my friend. If you can get more details, maybe we know more, but otherwise, as it stands right now, we don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure if you describe it a little bit, I'm sure we'll be able to have like a little discussion about it and our thoughts. But
Yes, so I guess let's start with apocalyptic media. Who would like to talk about some of their favorite apocalyptic media that's not just zombies?
so here's
Sure.
one that people don't think about too often. I think is the one with Jake Gyllenhaal, Day After Tomorrow. Right, that's a good example of actually watching the apocalypse progress in real time and how it affects people as it's happening versus the fallout of it afterwards. And what I like about that is that because in the beginning of the story he's like a college student who's struggling with his grades and everything, and his dad's kind of giving him crap and everything. We're watching that kind of be put into perspective now that these massive natural disasters are happening. It's put into perspective how unimportant some of those things can be when your main objective becomes survival rather than just functioning within a civilized world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tons of Roland Emmerich films are pretty much just straight up like this is the apocalypse as it's happening. Dude loves destroying shit, and that is kind of the whole thing for the apocalypse rather than the post-apocalypse. A good way to just tell the distinction is: are things currently being destroyed, or has shit already been destroyed?
Yeah, and I think it also affects.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think I think it also affects kind of what you want the central theme of a given story to be. Because sometimes if your story is during the progression of the apocalypse, you can have kind of a happy ending where people get together in a community despite the disasters and they start to have hope for the future and everything. So I feel like those are kind of a little bit more upbeat at their ending a lot of the time versus, something that's post-apocalyptic where, it's kind of like nihilistic. We don't know how to survive and things are getting worse and worse. There's raiders and all this going on. So I think the central themes of the stories also play into the at least the timeline of your setting.
And I also think that apocalyptic media, it can also be very turbulent in its usage. A lot of times I see authors taking the apocalyptic media and using it as an excuse to either denigrate a specific social or political issue they don't agree with, or show how this thing that we all are obsessed with doesn't matter in the long run. What matters is human survival or the human instinct or glorifying God or whatever the subject is. That's why a lot of Y2K stuff that happened, the apocalyptic media released around then, was supposed to be anti-machine. Talk about the errors and the evils that technology is going to give us. It turns out Uncle Ted was not the only guy who ever was suspicious of technology. He just killed people and didn't write, coherent media. He wrote a couple good mathematical treatises, though. I know that for a fact. I still see it cited sometimes. Say again?
was going to say, yeah, he wasn't a dumb guy by any means, but you know.
I wish he just wrote fantasy stories instead of making bombs that didn't work. Yeah,
I'd read those.
right? They'd be a lot of fun, I
Kaboom.
think.
Mhm.
He'd probably be more into sci-fi though, because look at how much he loved math.
But he hated technology.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. He'd be like those wooden robots from Futurama.
Yeah. I mean, you could also write science fiction that's specifically about how technology is corrupting things. That's also a possibility. Science fiction from the viewpoint that this is bad. All this stuff that's happening right here, this is bad.
Yeah, like the hit film Avatar from James Cameron.
Oh,
Oh yeah,
Oh man.
that
Yeah,
movie
one
is
popular
just full of
story.
avatars.
is
I'm
that
currently just like, I'm currently just looking through games, and one theme that I've noticed is also like fighting against the apocalypse.
Yes. Yeah, the Chrono Trigger was mentioned by another server member before we started here as a thing to bring up, and I guess congratulations, Garbled, you got your wish. But fighting against the apocalypse is a fantastic thing in games to talk about.
Oh yeah, the one that really brought it forward to me was Earth Defense Force 5.
Oh yeah, EDH.
I watched the Seth video on that one.
Yeah. It was.
Astro can hear you again, Nebula. All is saved.
Yep. Yeah, I know. Noticed.
Yeah, I looked up online that I can just disconnect from the call and reconnect. Then bam, I can hear you again.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Excellent.
All right. So yeah, I think fighting against the apocalypse, like the pre-apocalypse, if you will, that's another one of those pieces of media that I think are pretty relatively well explored, because we don't want the world to end. A lot of people will have these pie in the sky ideas about how the world would be better off if their ideology took over, or if we had a reset or something like that. Then I think it doesn't really happen that way, though. You don't want a total systems collapse. No matter how bad the system is, you would much rather just fix it from within.
Mhm.
Yeah, pretty much any systems collapse involves a absolute metric shitload of people dying. So it's almost always better to just kind of fix it. Wasn't there a movie with Bruce Willis where they fly up to an incoming asteroid and then drill into it and put nukes inside of it and explode it? Is this a Bruce Willis movie that I'm remembering properly? Does anybody
Yes,
remember this movie?
It's called Armageddon. I know what you're talking about. It's
Yes,
called
and
Armageddon. Wait, no.
there's
Is it?
Deep
I think
Impact.
it is.
There's two films that both got pitched by different people that came out the same time about going to an asteroid and blowing it up and nuking an asteroid to save humanity. It's fascinating that happened.
That actually happens a lot. There's a bunch of those that
Yes,
happen.
it's
There's
like,
the twin movie phenomena.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
yeah, I
Ants
would-
is another one, right? Ants and Bugs Life.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's Olympus Has Fallen, which is the one about the White House getting
Yeah,
invaded
White
and
House
exploding
down,
and whatnot. Mhm.
Yeah, and then White House Down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very
Yeah.
weird thing, and people. This is one of those things where I find it really interesting to think about. That's all. It'll be leading to a whole nother discussion, but the idea that people are given the similar influences and the muse will speak to multiple people, it's really fascinating, because that should tell you something as a storyteller, that maybe you should write that story now and not wait, because, well, somebody else might steal it. If you don't do it fast enough, the muse will whisper her lies in another ear for someone else. So
Yeah.
Although I am curious, do you think a lot of the twin movie things are because they have to workshop around the script, so a lot of people see the idea and then take it their own direction first?
I think
That's
that can
possible.
be some of it, but I think that there's too many of them for that to be the case.
Mhm.
And they are too fundamentally different.
I think it's one of those things, because I was looking up, different ways that like an apocalypse can happen as far as inciting event goes, and the different settings you can have. A big impact event, I guess, quote unquote, is the term they would use for something that's like an external force, like an asteroid or like a massive natural disaster, earthquake, tsunami, or something, creating an apocalyptic setting. So it is kind of like a recurring thing that we've seen throughout history, as far as like just a way to kind of, what's the word, like kind of create that setting or make that setting happen. So it doesn't surprise me that multiple people have come up with that, because if you're going to write an apocalyptic story, you got to have the apocalypse happen somehow. And that's a convenient way to do it, at least if you don't want to put too much of the blame on people alone.
And I think another thing before we move away from the convergent movie thing, the films are actually fundamentally different a lot of the times. They just have the same pitch. They go in completely different directions. So if they were really ripping each other off, you'd see much more similar storytelling. Go watch A Bug's Life and go watch Ants, and you're not going to think they're the same film. But the pitch of I want an animated film about an ant who wants to find himself with bug characters is the same. So, but yeah. So being off what Pop said about historical people constantly referencing apocalypses, I would like to draw people's attention to the first post-apocalyptic story ever told.
Boy,
the
let's
the
go.
Epic of Gilgamesh. Remember,
Gilgy boy.
yeah, Gilgamesh, the
Yep.
oldest tablet we have for it is 4,000 years old, and it begins with something along the lines of, "In those ancient days that we have long forgotten." Think about
In
that.
those ancient, yeah,
So even they're talking about this is older than writing in a lot of places. This is like the third or fourth oldest thing we have written ever. And it's talking about a time so far in the past it barely remembers it. And it's talking about back when the apocalypse first happened. That's when Gilgamesh's story is, occurring around. One of the things I think is fascinating is there's flood myths throughout a lot of the world. All of those are apocalypses. So technically any culture that has a flood myth about the world being wiped out, their society are all post-apocalyptic, which means that Christians and Jews, because of Noah, we exist in a post-apocalyptic setting. The Japanese, which will happen with the flooding of the world, they're a post-apocalyptic setting. Really interesting.
Oh,
things
the
to think
Aztecs
about.
also
The
have
deluge.
a
Yep, the Aztecs
post-apocalyptic flood story. As you may be able to see, my name is T.O.C. Packley. I took that straight from the Aztec flood myth.
Yep. And
uh-huh.
it's-
Yeah,
You
the
people
deluge.
might be surprised to know. I mean, almost every major culture that we know of has some sort of big flood myth, which I don't know if that makes it true, but it definitely is something to consider.
Oh,
That
there's
makes
Yes,
definitely
that has a
something
name
funky.
too.
That makes it true.
Yeah.
There's something
There's a
funky
name
that
for
happened there a while ago. But we'll talk about biblical floods later because that's another fun discussion topic. But yeah, so that means that if we go back and look at post-apocalyptic media and you think about it, these guys didn't even have bronze working for their tools, and they were talking about post-apocalypses. So the idea of a society continuing after the collapse of the world is very common. And I think limiting it to this, it's the modern age but collapsed, is a terrible way to just limit yourself. You can have so many cool and interesting different ways that the world could have ended at different time periods. I've never
Mhm.
seen a really well done post apocalyptic Renaissance period. How cool would that be?
Oh.
You got muskets, you got sails, you got telescopes, but you got like Michelangelo's paintings and just the introduction of the modern era, and then the apocalypse hits. I guess Attack on Titan is the only thing that's close to it, but still,
Eh,
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of a neat
Well,
idea.
yeah.
I mean,
Well, 'cause see, I mean,
if
it's-
writers today went to the Renaissance, they would hate it and would just complain about that instead of actually running a zombie story.
Yeah, that's true.
on,
I
Like,
know.
on the
there's a
subject of
serious
Attack on Titan, by the
Cultural
way.
element you have to mention there.
There is one story that comes to mind of an apocalypse at a very interesting time in history.
Yeah?
I remember watching a movie for it, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which
Oh yeah.
is a parody.
Yeah,
But
I
it
remember
does-
seeing ads for that, and I was like, what the actual fuck?
But it does set an apocalypse at a time in history you don't usually see, which is interesting. Seeing how, with their society and their technology, they have to try to deal with it.
Yeah,
A
I'd
Renaissance
also
era
say
zombie apocalypse story, huh? Sign me up.
I'd also say we still see kind of recurring, I guess you'd call them themes, or I guess they'd be called themes, regardless of whether the apocalypse occurs during the Renaissance period, during the modern day, before the times of Gilgamesh. We always see recurring things like, certain resources become extra super duper valuable. Certain disparities in wealth, whether wealth be, land ownership, livestock, weaponry, everything. It's always kind of, regardless of what those weapons are, for example, we constantly do see somebody develop kind of a hierarchy and their new system within that world because of things like that. And I, only given it so much thought, but I think that's super interesting that it's like a vehicle by which to create a new world, which is also one of those things I think people like getting into these stories about and why it draws them in, because a lot of people do desire kind of what you call a factory reset, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you want to
by
quickly
the way,
talk something in the chat real quick for DM Thedes? You're kind of correct. Berserk is pretty much an apocalyptic thing at this point.
Oh, yeah. So with Berserk, I think the apocalypse occurs like at some point deeper into the narrative. Like it's not immediate set in that world, which is it's an interesting way to do it, but I would classify it as apocalyptic.
Yeah, specifically with the eclipse. And on your point, King, you mentioned Attack on Titan. I don't think necessarily that. Oh wait, you said apocalyptic, not post-apocalyptic, correct?
Yes, this is apocalyptic things.
Okay, well, because I would say that the apocalypse part really starts to kick in around season 4, because throughout seasons 1 through 2, the people of Paradis, like they think the world has ended, but the world hasn't really ended.
Yeah,
So,
I know.
like,
Attack on Titan gets stupid.
It was just diversion.
Yeah.
Also, it
Yeah.
sucked.
Yeah.
The reveal sucked. They spent up so much time to reveal it, but it sucked. Like there was coffee pot foreshadowing. So like it was planned from the beginning to do that, but it sucks because it's just basic ass Germany. It's
Yeah.
it's something
really-
you've seen in media 100 times.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
but they have an
the
Asian now.
apocalypse.
All right. Duly noted. If you want Astro to talk, just bring up Berserk.
No, it's
No,
Attack on
Attack on
Titan.
Titan.
Oh,
Yeah.
my bad.
No.
My bad.
Yeah, no, the thing with the Attack on
Oops.
Titan is that the apocalypse thing really kicks into overdrive around season 4, and I think now, granted, I haven't really given Attack on Titan a purely a completely analytical eye, because I was mainly just intrigued by the different aspects of it, such as the introduction of the Warhammer Titan, which died in the very first episodes by which it was introduced. But like the idea of the rumbling, like as a concept, is what pretty much drew me into season 4, because the rumbling is a very interesting way to end the world. You have a bunch of giants, not even just like attempting to, destroy the world. They're not active. Well, they are, but they're not taking that heavy.
They're not organized.
Because they're
abject
mindless
role.
drones.
Yeah, they're mindless drones, and just them walking around is enough to destroy the world. And
They
the idea-
more or less fill out their role as zombies, as like it was in the beginning of the show. But even though they change how it was in the middle,
Yeah. My only issue is that I always think that the problem with Attack on Titan is always like scale, because I always believe that the Titans should always be bigger. Because like particularly like the Colossal Titan and the walls and like everything would benefit if everything was just a lot bigger. You know what I mean? But like
I
maybe the
disagree
Tiny
so
Titan-
much. That show's got
Really?
such a problem with everything being too big. People
Yeah,
do
it
not
really does
understand
already.
scale at all. It ruins
Yeah.
so
No, come
many
on, no,
things.
think about it. Think about it.
Yeah.
Think about it. Think about
No,
it.
I am.
I have thought about it.
The
That's the
reason why
problem.
it would be better is that we can match them up with other pieces of fiction and make them fight, because now they're
No,
big enough.
I don't want him to fight Godzilla. That's stupid. Shut up. I'm killing you. You talk about
Right.
Godzilla every week on your podcast. You're not doing it here, too.
All right. So
Kid, he has cursed you. Now you've brought up Godzilla.
Ah, no!
we're off.
I didn't say the name at all.
Fellas.
I didn't say the name. I tricked you.
Yeah, he didn't say anything. You
Fellas.
did.
If I
So-
may. Just to address what Rooney said, while also veering off from Godzilla, I would say scale again is something very important. Whether you're judging an apocalyptic story, post-apocalyptic story, or you want to create your own, scale is always very important. So,
That's
like
true.
when you say post-apocalyptic, are you describing, let's say, like the USA gets bombed out and becomes a no man's land? Well, then you have to take into account external factors like global politics. It's post-apocalyptic for Americans, but it's not post-apocalyptic for the Chinese. Perhaps it's a new opportunity, maybe for the Russians who want to invade in. So there's different ways to scale your story, and you do have to pay attention to that, because there's a lot of things you have to take into account when you're creating that world.
You make a good point, Pops. You actually remind me of another story. On scale, you can make something very small feel apocalyptic, and it can have such a peculiar effect, especially when the outside world comes in. A story that I really liked that did this was the King of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies, yeah. I'm bad with names, but reading the story, it really feels like something apocalyptic is going on there. Like, I know it's just a survival story on an island, but with how hopeless it feels and just the way a lot of the
Personal
lore
apocalypse.
brings
Yeah.
you into it, it feels like it's apocalyptic.
Because I think part of like the central theme to stories like this is that like the central theme is just purely survival. You know, you have none of your creature comforts living in society. Your main goal is to make sure that you eat at some point that day.
Yeah. and
So
putting
yeah,
a
you
bunch
can
of
make
kids
things
to
feel
it.
apocalyptic without having it, you know, scale up to the entire world. And sometimes there are stories that are more well done because they scale it down like that, and they make you want to root for those characters rather than having you have this whole nihilistic thing of, oh, people destroyed the world or it's this guy's fault and everything. I think it does help you get invested in characters better to have something a little bit more insulated, even if the scale of the disaster is bigger than them. You don't need to have all of that come into play every single time.
Yeah,
On this
and I mean, there's
subject-
things like Stalker, Shatter Chernobyl, like that game, or Roadside Picnic, the novel it's based off of, where it's just, I mean, it's literally just around the Chernobyl reactors, and it's kind of post-apocalyptic. It's definitely shit's pretty fucked up around there.
I'll do you one
but
better.
it's very, very. Yeah.
There's a 1 mile by 1 mile section of land that's destroyed, and it is the greatest apocalypse for our characters. I'm talking about Watership Down. The little rabbits, their bunnies, their entire homes
dude.
get destroyed. That is one of the most
That is-
intense and horrifying post-apocalyptic and apocalyptic media as you'll see. And it's about rabbits watching their home get turned into housing.
Yep.
So, yeah, considering
And,
the scale of the
actually,
apocalypse. Yes, WL?
Speaking of
They-
something like that, is the
A bit of,
Warriors series.
The Warrior series.
yeah.
Yeah, what's that about?
Yeah. It's like a collection of cats and clans and such. It's a pretty old series at this point, but in the second set of books, I believe,
Uh-huh.
the whole forest that the cats were living in is getting actively bulldozed by humans, and it's putting it all into like the perspective of a cat who has no idea what this machinery is, no idea what the humans are doing, and they just have to leave.
Yeah, that'd be pretty horrific.
So it's a
That's awesome.
yeah.
That's a great way to
And
do it.
this includes also the humans trying to round up the cats to like not kill them, but they're taking them away from their groups as well.
Just disappearing them.
The cat, the
Yeah.
humans think
basically.
we're helping the cats find a new home. The cats think these demonic monsters are kidnapping our friends.
Yeah.
That sounds a lot like Watership Down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what we're saying.
really
Down,
does.
Watership Down deserves more praise, dude. Because even then, I mean, the way that so the main character is actually, I believe it's him and then his brother and maybe someone else who have already lost their home, and they go to a new, I guess you'd call it a quote unquote like little collection, a little colony, you know, a little system there. And it's also a critique on kind of the moral systems of how to survive in a situation like that, because their new leader in this new colony, I think, was, I don't want to call him like warmongering, but his whole deal was kind of based on, I think it was fascism. You remember that rabbit, the big one with the scars on his face?
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Oh my goodness! I want to call out DM Thedes. Thank you so much for giving 10 channel memberships to people. That's awesome. Thank you, my friend. All right,
Right on.
so let's
Great
call out
job.
some of these new members. We got Apathetic Empathy, Empathetic Apathy's one. Blowfish is one. Hey, Blowfish, you're a mod here. AJB Production,
Blowfish.
you're also a mod here. Tony Baloney, Gaslight 88, Down to Day Jesus, Frozen JD, and Shirtless. Shirtless is also in our server here. I know him. An Existence That Exists, and Douglas Gnida were given memberships. Thank you so much for that, Thedes. You're my man. You know, if you
Awesome.
if you guys aren't part of the Discord yet, you should come swing on over there and say hi. By being a channel member here, you actually get access to a special room in the Discord.
Yep, it's the racial slur room.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're allowed to say one
we have a
message at
bunch
the
of
bottom
slurs.
doors a week.
Yeah.
Terms and
Today's
conditions
slur of
apply.
the
I don't know
day
how to set the
is-
bot to do that.
Slur of the day. Hopefully many more to come. Thank you very much, guys.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Wouldn't the new Planet of the Apes be considered apologetic? I think apocalyptic more than apologetic, but yes.
Well,
I think
the old
I think that's what he
apocalyptic.
meant, yeah.
I think the current
Hello,
one is
Alex
post-apocalyptic because it's supposed to be so long after everything happened that humans can no longer talk. That's my
Yes.
understanding of it. I have not kept
Right.
up to date.
No, you're
I
right,
think Dawn
because
too.
because those old ones, there was like 5 old ones you remember with like the kind of the crappy costume design and the, they were kind of funky looking. And again, humans were kept as slaves, and it was already the Planet of the Apes in that universe as it was happening. What we were seeing with this kind of new series, starting with Caesar, was the progression that led us to that point. So I would say it's just starting to transition from apocalyptic to post-apocalyptic now with these new movies. Yeah, I would say it definitely falls in that category. Yeah.
Do you think the movie will be good, though, is the question.
Oh,
I
no.
haven't watched any of them since part 2 with Commissioner Gordon.
All I want to know is if the lady's gonna fuck the monkey.
Oh, no.
Definitely is.
Absolutely. She's white. She's gonna.
Oh, no.
He's white.
Oh,
Shut it down.
no.
I
Shut
will
it down.
say, I feel like there's a lot of writing issues. It's been a while, but I remember being frustrated by a lot of things in it.
Well, yeah, I know that it shouldn't exist as an IP, and they keep forcing it to, so that's kind of why there's going to be writing issues. If you like it, that's fine, but Planet of the Apes is very clearly one story that they keep pulling into like 30 more.
World of Monkey.
It's true.
Yeah, they're like, we can do more of this. We can
Yeah.
squeeze some more dollars out of this, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, milk the cow.
Exactly. So I just want to finish up this earlier thing we brought up with the Gilgamesh being post-apocalyptic. So this is an interesting thing to consider, because if Gilgamesh is a post-apocalyptic story, then you get to understand a whole lot more of what's going on in the world that Gilgamesh is in. That's why there are wild men like Enkidu who live out in the woods. That's why the cities are these new bastions and strange things. That only works if you understand that they had to exist beforehand so humanity could prosper. Then they were wiped out by the flood. Again, we know that wild men can exist outside of cities, but in the ideas and the mythology at the time, it didn't work like that. Humans had to come from civilization because they thought cities would make people. So that's just an interesting thing to consider, and helps explain some of the cultural contexts in that story, which really fleshes it out more. It's also quite funny that Enkidu, the wild man, the only time he fully becomes a normal human being is after he goes and Gilgamesh pays for him to have a night with a whore. And that's what turns him from just a savage in the woods to being an upright, civilized man.
Yeah, the worst part of that, before that happened, he almost had like supernatural powers, to the point where Gilgamesh did that on purpose to try and negate whatever danger he might have caused and pacify. Yeah, so he used to be able to talk to animals, like every little thing, to survive on his own. And then, as always, women ruin everything, and he goes back in the woods, and everyone's like, "I don't know you, get out of here." He's like, "But you can't, it's me, guy." Now a dog is barking.
He used to basically be like, was it Cinderella could talk to all the animals? They were his buddies. And then when he came back, like, "Oh, you smell of woman. Get out of here. Incel only club."
I think it was, but yeah.
Well, and just imagine that. You're homies with the deer, and you go and you have a night in the town with the boys. You meet a lovely lady tonight. You go home, and the deer doesn't want to be your friend anymore. He's like, I can't rap with that, man.
I can smell it on you.
I can smell it. You're rejected by the deer.
How dare you go
Did I
get
have a question?
civilized?
Yeah, I have an answer.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So, are there any stories after Ragnarok in Norse mythology? Because if there is,
yes, absolutely. Ragnarok is not actually like the end of all being, and nothing
It's
will
the end
ever
of the
exist
gods.
again. Ragnarok is a cyclical thing, or cyclical. It's a cyclical thing that happens with the gods. Like Odin says in that one movie, and I don't want to just quote Marvel as an authority, but he goes, we're not totally gods. We're mortal. We live, we die. And then, the universe goes back into balance afterwards, and everything hits a reset. So it's not technically like the same as like the biblical Armageddon. But
really crazy. If you look at Norse mythology and try to understand some of what was being written at the time, you get this idea that Baldur is actually Jesus Christ. He dies for our, for our sins. The world goes on, and then eventually, when he comes back, because Baldur does come back at the end of the Norse myth, everything else is killed, and a fresh start with humanity is. what's even more interesting to consider is that's the top level reading of Ragnarok. If you go like one step further, which Tolkien does, yes, the Tolkien who wrote Lord of the Rings, he reads it as a creation myth. If you look at Ragnarok through the lens of Baldur and humanity are the ones who survive, then he actually brings Adam and Eve to Earth. That's what Baldur's job is. And that's what starts humanity as a whole, which is really, really interesting. Yeah.
So you're telling me that Kratos killed Jesus?
Oh no.
No, because
Yeah.
Baldur is different. Baldur is definitely
Wait, no, Baldur survives. He's just staying out of the way in the games.
Yeah. Because again, that's what happens. Baldur gets his head handed to him, and then the world gets reset, and that's when he comes back. Alex Gomez is right. The Hindu and the Native American mythology also have similar stories. Yeah, there's a lot of stories out there about the world was cool, the gods all died, and then a couple humans survived, and now we're in this age. It's really interesting how many stories have, in the past, all the gods got killed. That reminds me. One of these
The
days
Greeks
when we start
have
getting
a
into...
similar.
Go ahead, Theo.
The Greeks have a similar thing. They were the Titans who, I believe, in the Golden Age, made a race of man. The gods take over, kill them. Then we have the Silver Age. They kill the Silver Age man. There's the Bronze Age, and I think the Bronze Age men also die. And then we have like the Age of Heroes, and then the modern Iron Age.
So
I think that sounds right.
The big issue that that God/Titans had with the Golden Age was that they weren't paying them tribute because they were made of gold and they were made of silver. They were so beautiful that all they did was look at themselves in the mirror and talk about how great they were without any appreciation for their creator, which also is something we it's a cruder way of looking at the way that the effects of a deity can cause the apocalypse.
Thank God that that's not
But then-
happening these days. We're all humbly and correctly aligned.
no, that would suck.
The
I believe
Bronze
the
Age
Greeks did
died out.
explicitly have some idea that after the Age of Iron, things are just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse.
Leave it.
Perhaps.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I do want to answer a question in chat, though, for TS Albatross. Does that mean we're living through a post-apocalypse? Kind of. We're living through the third thing that we're talking about, the post-apocalypse, where the apocalypse is so far in the past that we've moved on from it, and it's become a bit of foundational lore that is like a cautionary tale. Not many settings get that far, but we'll get to that as we keep talking.
Yeah, it's like a demiurge. Or no, deluge.
A deluge is a bit different.
That
Deluge
was
is
my
another
favorite.
thing. But
Yeah, no, I confused it too. No, I meant
It's okay.
deluge. Deluge. I can't with that word. What was it?
Deluge. Say it with me. One at a time. Deluge. Like you're speaking French. Luge.
Oh, you're making me speak French? Oh, hell no.
I don't speak French. I don't know.
Yeah, go ask a gay liar. For the record, chat, we have a Frenchman in another server. His name is like Gaylor, but nobody can pronounce it, so everybody just kept calling him gay liar because it's easier. It's not that he's gay and he lies, it's just he's French, so maybe he does then.
I mean,
love
what's the difference?
Yeah, it's pretty much like what Americans did back in the day with Hispanic names when they couldn't pronounce it. You got a guy named Miguel. Miguel? No, your name is McGill.
Suck McGill.
Come here,
I warned you, bro. I warned you.
That PBS show.
Listen, the American version of
I
names
warned
are
you.
superior.
Wait, that was completely unrelated. I did not mean to do that. I'm sorry.
No, you're lying. There's a character named Juan Miguel, and his name is John McGill in the book. But anyway, let's move
I
on.
realized it halfway through.
Yeah, bullshit.
Titan, he's not here to defend himself, so I'm not going to just beat
You
him
got
up
two
like
strikes.
that. Go for it, Titan, though.
He doesn't lie. He's simply French. There is okay. There's no effective difference, but there is a difference.
But yeah, so I guess as we keep brushing into it, we should probably mention what is a post-apocalyptic story. So a post-apocalyptic story. I'm getting a Rooney mouth. What do you else say it?
I can't.
I'm sorry.
A post-apocalypse.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, in
Thank
these
you.
stories, like I said earlier, the world has moved on effectively from the apocalypse. I think this is one of the most fertile grounds for storytelling because a lot of the best stories actually are this, but you don't know it. For example, the entirety of the setting for the original Dungeons and Dragons of Greyhawk, that whole setting, is a post-apocalypse. If you think historically, the time after the fall of the Roman Empire is a post-apocalypse. They haven't quite achieved the same technological, cultural, magical, whatever, scientifical, whatever word you want to use. They haven't achieved the same heights as beforehand, but they've clearly moved past we're digging through the ruins of the kingdoms that have collapsed. That's a very interesting place to put your story. And I think that it can really lead to a lot of fun. A lot of settings will have a specific thing, like the Dwemer in the Elder Scrolls had an apocalypse, and now we're picking through their remains. I'm okay with it being in its singular spots like that, but I think it's way more interesting to have the entire setting was destroyed, and civilization had to climb back through this setting, and is now trying to figure out where it's at. Ironically, before they canceled the entire line, this is where Dark Sun was at in its setting. It had just moved from a post-apocalyptic setting to a post-apocalyptic setting because of I think it's 7 Wizard Kings or Sorcerer Kings. They killed one, and another one had resigned their godhood. So it's clearly moving towards, if the setting was allowed to continue, a new reinvigoration and much more interesting stories in the world.
Apologies, might be slightly ahead of it, but
Sure.
did the Warhammer universe technically go through all the stages? Because I know the
Yes,
Necrons
kind of.
basically had their apocalypse,
Yeah.
then
40k is still in the apocalypse. 40k.
Necrons went
Yeah.
through the apocalypse. Humans lived in the post-apocalypse. Now we're witnessing the apocalypse.
Yeah,
Well,
I guess
There's been a lot of apocalypses. No, there have been multiple apocalypses in 40k, all right?
Yeah.
There was the Necrons.
Yeah.
There was the Eldar when Slaanesh came out. There was the humans just imploding in on themselves. There were so many apocalypses.
Yeah.
Yep.
King, I have a question.
Part of-
2 questions for you, actually.
Sure, buddy.
Because 2 questions and a point to make. Number 1, how many apocalypses can a civilization in a story go through before the term becomes meaningless? Because an apocalypse
infinite, because the
Yeah.
tough part about it is trying to define whether or not it's like you have to take into account like whether or not the so-called apocalyptic story is looked at as a foundation myth or something that's like genuinely like everyone believes in it fundamentally and how relevant it is to them. Because you see the same thing with like religion. We have like a foundation myth, quote unquote, but it's become so long that some people just don't believe in it. So it's a little hard to define, but like if you can make it, into a fundamentally interesting part of the narrative, I'd say yeah, absolutely, it's fertile ground. But I would say it's an infinite number because it's not like humans live forever. There's not going to be somebody who remembers the apocalypse from a million years ago. It's just going to, be part of their own lore and their beliefs. And then with the new generations, the story will change. Maybe something new will happen. But I would say it's never going to be totally meaningless.
Oh yeah, because I was thinking that, okay, like the word apocalypse, it indicates finality, right? It's the end of something. Now, like I guess that would depend on the type of apocalypse, because not every apocalypse, results in the end of all things. Some apocalypses result in the
Sort
mass
of, yeah.
extinction, like with dinosaurs have their own apocalypse, etc. But yeah, no. My next question.
Well, I want to
and
finish
this will
answering the
lead
first
into
one
a-
before you get to it. So you said civilization. That's an important distinction from a setting.
Mm.
A single civilization probably cannot survive more than 2 apocalypses without major changes to itself. That's something you got to remember. If an apocalypse hits your setting and the civilization survives one of them, that's okay. 2 of them, that's really unrealistic unless you have a specialty weird civilization that can insulate itself. I think the greatest idea is to look at any mythos about Atlantis. Atlantis can is hit with 1 apocalypse. After that, it can survive that time and still be intact, even if it's changed slightly. If it gets hit with the second apocalypse and it survives, it feels unrealistic because at this point you're like, okay, they're not going to die. There's nothing that's going to stop them.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But
And also after
Tom.
that second. So it was after that second one dies out, even if like let's say the buildings are still up and the land is still above water, you're going to develop something totally different at that point, because the scale again plays into it. The amount of I'm not sure what you'd call it, like civilizational memory or what people believe in, is going to be fundamentally different at that point after a second like disaster event, I would say, regardless of whether the place still exists in a physical sense. The people are going to change, the beliefs are going to change, the civilization, the culture, the morals, maybe even the code, the way that things are run, everything is going to be pretty much unrecognizable.
Right. Okay. I think I get it now.
And second
My next
question?
question. Yeah, my second question, and this is going to lead into a point I want to make.
Okay.
Are wars inherently apocalyptic, or do they have to be big enough to be considered an apocalypse?
No,
Definitely not apocalyptic.
wars are something else.
Yeah.
Not yet.
It's like I think war has changed in its definition of what people think of when people say war. It's like in the old days, wars were fought with spears and stuff, and now you have nuclear missiles in the present day.
So I
That's
think that well, I want to get to this point. I think that to answer the question, wars and apocalypse stories, we're talking about storytelling, do share a similar DNA, but wars are only specifically that region that is currently war torn have that DNA. Upturn, change, societal collapse, survival, that fits there. However, not all wars are like that. There are plenty of wars that are fought from distances so far away that people in the middle aren't affected. Then you go look at the front lines of the Western Front in World War I. That is an apocalyptic setting because the world is destroyed here. You have the ground torn apart. There's poison gas in the air. That's apocalyptic. You then go to the Eastern Front where there was literally no ability to dig trenches because the rains made the ground so soft and the cold made the ground so hard that you just couldn't dig trenches. You had literally like those boats with the giant fans in the back of them going around with machine guns shooting each other on some parts of the Eastern Front. It was so fluid. That's clearly not a post-apocalypse because what's going on there is too fluid and there's too many things moving back and forth for it to be. It's damaging, it's chaotic, but it's definitely not destroying the environment in a way that is post-apocalyptic. And I don't want to be mean, but from what I've seen from most of like our invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, that's not a post-apocalyptic society. We did go in there to try to help an existing civilization. So it's different there than a nuke going off and just killing 80% of all life.
Yeah.
Right.
I would say I would take it to an even more extreme scale, because if we talk about primitive warfare and like the idea without like global interaction, like the reason that it was called World War I was because the whole world wanted to get involved, or felt an obligation to get involved, or at least it felt like that. And in
back then it was called the Great War.
right,
Yeah, the war to end all wars.
Because it was so
Clearly it didn't, but
kind of. And then but in instances before that, where let's say you don't have another country to back you up, or you're not even aware that there's another continent on the opposite side of the ocean, then it's absolutely apocalyptic for you. But it plays into the idea of like scaling the awareness of where on the timeline you are politically. Do countries even know about each other, or is it literally like one race of people basically wiping out another? You can make it apocalyptic, but again, it depends on the way that you set up the whole world.
so it's scale then.
Kind of, yeah.
All right, so I do want to answer a few
There's
comments real quick, guys. First of all, Titan has been fantastic explaining the different pieces of lore here. For Warhammer, talk about who had an apocalypse, who's got one, who didn't. I do want to circle back to that one and talk about it. Second, Federico, do you think Primal takes place in a post-apocalyptic world or in the past? I don't know. I haven't seen Primal all the way through. I've seen clips of it. I can't say to that. And I also don't know what you think about the second or third comment we made. I don't know. Yes, Alex, I know World War I wasn't actually the First World War. I believe the War of 1812 could probably be considered the actual First World War. Second, or third, Des, if you're listening, which you better be, yes, you're welcome to come on, and we will bully you for being late. When he gets here, make sure everybody yell at Destructo and call him Late Boy.
By the way, to respond to Federico, I have seen Primal, and no, I wouldn't consider Primal a post-apocalyptic story because so far there hasn't really been an apocalypse in the entirety of the story. There are events that are really catastrophic, but they're not apocalyptic inherently. So no, but it's a great show. I recommend it.
Des is here.
It is a
Des.
Oh,
great
late
show.
boy.
I don't know what show you're talking about, but it's a great
Hey,
show.
lady.
That's my favorite
Yeah,
show, actually.
Real
Oh,
quick,
yeah.
as a history guy, you're kind of our resident guy who reads books and shit.
Uh-huh.
Do you have anything that you would call apocalyptic, even if it's scaled down a bit, at least as far as real historical events go?
No, not right now. But that's mainly because I haven't read in depth about like the Black Death or like during the later years of Justinian's reign. I only just started recently Procopius's History of Wars, and I'm not even sure he's going to really go into a lot of the plagues of Justinian. But those would be the two major ones off the top of my head that like I mean, especially with the Black Death, people thought the world was ending. Like,
Yeah, it would fit that category. Yeah.
right? Yeah.
I mean, even with the Plague of Justinian, which is believed to possibly be another Black Death, like a precursor.
yeah,
all
bubonic
of those
plague.
events are terrible because it's something sweeping across the nation. Because of how varied it is, that's a bunch of science I won't get into, but it's hard to know exactly what's going on. So for everyone, everyone in Europe, they wanted to try to get out of there, which would absolutely decimate your ability to govern, your ability to just function as a society. It's really interesting to see how things come across as apocalyptic throughout history. Sorry.
Right.
No,
Sure.
Black Death times were actually paradise because all the French were dying.
Well, I mean, actually, I can think of one which would be, I guess, kind of the era of between like basically Basil II and Alexios Komnenos, and that's solely because and the source actually doesn't reflect that because the main primary source, I don't think I have it around me. No, I don't. The main source of it is pretty calm, mainly because he's nepotistically like hyping up the emperor that he helped raise, basically. But the one would be with the Eastern Roman Empire during the time, like right before the First Crusade, because from that time they lose like half of like the area of Yugoslavia, basically. Like they lose a ton of land there. They lose almost all of their positions in Anatolia. They lose Antioch, of course. And that only gets conquered back from Alexios. They lose Sicily. They never get the Italian
I
peninsula
have to
back.
interrupt you.
All right. Yeah.
What are you
So,
talking
to
about,
wrap
Des?
that up, real.
So
Listen,
I was adjusting the Discord, the live stream, because now we got some nice 8 thing going on here. It can look beautiful, and everybody's booing you for being late.
yeah,
What do
that's
you
fair
got?
enough.
I think you're trying to
What the hell are
relate
you
the
talking
fall of
all
the
right,
Romans
I got
to
it.
the.
Hops was talking about apocalypse of events, and I talked about 2 that I have not read about, and then I talked about one that I did, which was apocalyptic in a different type of way, just because there was 3 there's
Chat,
just a lot of
bully this
invading
man.
forces coming upon the Eastern Roman Empire to where like they easily could have fallen.
Alex and Albatross got me. They're bullying him right now.
So-
Good boys.
So to wrap that up, anyway, folks, take notes. These are all real historical things that both have inspired post-apocalyptics and apocalypse. Nobody can say it. Oh my God!
We've been saying it too much, is why.
Perfect.
Yes, so I think the
Anyway,
plague of
yeah.
Justinian.
Post-apocalypse.
Yeah, I
These
think the
are all
plague of
different
Justinian.
ways.
I want to point to that and dial down there because I think it's a good idea. The plague of Justinian is a fantastic apocalyptic story time and a great place to pull from because you got to look more than just that. The plague of Justinian had a lot of other crazy shit happen around it. For example, we think Krakatoa exploded, which caused the entire sky to be black for like a week. Just imagine that, a week of no sunlight and there's no electricity. That must have been wild. Then all the crops starved, then everything got cold, then the plague showed up. It's just a terrible time to be alive.
Yeah,
That
and there's
actually
to this
does
day.
remind me of I don't remember when. It was like I think during either fairly like during Napoleonic campaigns or like after, but there was that one summer that like I don't remember what volcano went off, but then it was like
Krakatoa.
blotted
It's
out.
Krakatoa.
Oh,
Anytime
it's
something bad
Krakatoa that
happens in
happened.
history, it's Krakatoa. I
It's
promise.
Krakatoa. Okay, gotcha.
You all hear these stories about Yosemite gonna go nuclear. It's gonna kill everybody. No.
You
This is the
said
real
nuclear.
conspiracy theory. It's nuclear. It's gonna go nuclear and kill everybody. No. It's Krakatoa.
Oh,
Krakatoa is the one that's gonna actually kill everybody. Why? Because unlike everything else, it has tried at least 4 times. It keeps trying.
Well, that's part of the reason why something like that is it's such become kind of like a disaster kind of apocalyptic trope almost, to have a natural disaster like a quote unquote like super volcano. Like there's probably doomsday cults in the States who think like Mount St. Helens or Yosemite is going to go off and then we'll all be screwed. Like to this day that idea still persists, and it's because of things like that.
I mean, it's not, but
Yeah.
by the way,
All right,
by the
buddy.
way, King, before we got sidetracked, I had a really interesting point to make because there is this comic called
Okay.
Ultra Mega that
Look
I
at
have
this guy.
It
Holy
only has
fuck.
6 issues. It is never going to
Five-
get another issue
5
as we
issues.
live.
It's gonna get more issues, Astro. You stupid
Guys,
idiot!
it's gonna blow up. It's gonna be the biggest thing ever. I swear.
It's gonna-
Look,
I
it has
It
swear.
has
only
not had an issue in
5
2
people care
years.
about it.
Guys,
But
relax.
it's gonna
Hasn't
be
an issue in
boys.
2 years.
James Herron said he was gonna complete it. Okay,
George R. R.
He's
Martin
gotta
said he's going to
complete
complete
it.
Wings of Winter too.
Oh.
It's coming out. Issue 6 is coming out. I promise.
Oh yeah. So
All
I
right,
also
all
really
right.
just
Like,
like the
hey, you
idea
need to
that
let
there's-
go.
I have a meme in my head I'll have to make after the show's done. It's just Rooney talking about something, and then the door gets kicked in behind him and slammed into him as Astro kicks in. No! 6 issues, no more coming out!
It's
No.
the bird meme. That's the one you ought to use.
Yes.
You've got
Also, I'm wrong.
Yes.
It actually only had 4 issues.
Oh, even better.
Shut up!
Oh,
Shut up! Shut up!
It's over.
Shut up! It's coming out.
Every
Issue 5
time
and
you
6 are
look, it
coming
has
out.
less issues.
It's an SCP.
Last issue was
Mandela
June 2021.
Yeah, SCP-42069, the unreleasing comic. Every time you look at it, there are less issues here. Object class, I don't know. Keter? Because everything's Keter. Actually, it would be object
Yeah,
class safe.
I do know the actual like reasoning behind all the classifications. They have really fucked that up a lot.
Yeah, didn't they like? It wasn't like there's 3 or 4 of them, and then they made this
Yeah.
whole pie chart was like 16 now. Where it's like, oh yeah, you're
well,
a,
no, I know the
non-performing
definition
Keter,
of the
blah, blah, blah.
usual one. I know I know the usual ones, and I
Uh-huh.
also know that people have fucked up those usual ones so often. Because
Yeah.
it's not like, oh, how dangerous is it? It is what happens if you put it in a box and leave it there.
Yeah.
That
Will it destroy
that is what
everything?
Will it is
What
the
else?
box? Is it still there in the box? Safe. I don't care if it could cause an apocalypse by breathing. If you put it in a box
Oh.
and it can't get out, it's safe. That's how it's meant to be.
It's just
Schrodinger's
escape risk, not
world.
lethality.
Yes.
What if it stops existing once until you
Uh,
start observing it? Then what class
That
is
would be Euclid, where you have no idea what the fuck is going on with it in the box.
Yeah.
You don't know if it's still there.
Yeah,
You
Titan
can't
knows.
be sure it's still there,
Okay.
etc. Euclid is you don't know what happens. Keter is the box is fucking gone and it is ran off somewhere there, or it has just gotten out of containment somehow. That is Keter. Keter is not even it destroyed the place. It could be just it teleported somewhere else.
It just ain't here.
Okay.
It's like
Pops, I
the,
actually did think of another one, and it would be
Go
when
ahead.
the Visigoths came into Rome, because it was the first time, and I want to say over 1,000 years,
oh yeah.
that like Rome was actually threatened. And
There
the
was-
Visigoths were actually really nice. They were like, oh, this isn't too bad. Like they stole stuff, but they like
Well, I
were
would
like
call them,
nice to the clergy and stuff.
I
So
would
it
call
wasn't
them
as bad as typical
tolerant.
sects.
I would call them tolerant more so than nice. But I know what
Yeah.
you mean, because like there's like, accounts of people that lived through some ancient war, and you listen to these translations of them, and a lot of them come out to people getting invaded and literally being like, this is the end. It's over for us. We're
There
done.
you go, there you go, chat. We got a lovely meme on screen for you all.
Well, it was also the Roman Empire, and if you know anything about the Roman Empire, they were basically the first inseegers. So like, if there was even a hint that like they were losing, like they were in zingers.
Oh, I got
They
you.
wanted, if they were going down,
So
they would throw
NSEG, for
every
those of
man,
you who
woman, and
don't speak
children
German or
at
play
them.
Hoi 4, and the NSEG basically means we're going to die and make sure you lose as many people as possible with us. We're never going to surrender. No civilians get out of here. We'll take you down with us.
Mm.
The Romans would tie a nuke to their forehead and say, let's headbutt.
Yeah.
All
That's
right.
a very interesting. Yeah, that's a super duper. I don't know if it's Roman specifically or it's kind of something that became like pretty widely European. The idea that like we're not going to give up a battle. We'll fight to the last man. Like you didn't see that all
It-
around the world at the time.
It was
So
Roman.
I
It
do want
was
to tie us back a
specifically
little bit, boys.
Roman.
Let's cut back to the post-apocalyptic
Yeah.
stuff.
Anyway,
We need to have a historical
Yeah.
discussion one of these days. So on the more situation with the apocalypse, if I look at the show notes, we were going to talk about several settings, such as a fantasy post-apocalypse versus a sci-fi post-apocalypse. Now, I'm going to come at it from a fantasy perspective, and I would like other people here to pick a side, but I'm pretty sure I know where everybody's going to line up. And let's talk about some of the differences between them. I think the first and foremost, the biggest difference is the effect that technology has. Because in a science fiction post-apocalypse, technology must be more disrupted. That has to happen in order for it to make it more effective. Whereas in a fantasy apocalypse, magic must be disrupted, or else you could use magic to fix a lot of the problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just kind of whatever the dominating order is must be disrupted. So that explains why in like Forgotten Realms you see the spell plague, which destroys everything. Or I think there's also a time in Forgotten Realms when the gods walk the earth, and that was pretty bad time. Pretty bad time in Forgotten Realms. They did not
Yeah,
happen.
that happened. They keep
Dungeons and
retconning when
Dragons.
that happened, but it keeps happening.
Yeah. Whereas in like a science fiction post-apocalypse would kind of be something more like an EMP or the nuclear apocalypse.
well, it's more like almost like Terminator.
Mhm,
Technically consider that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's also the interesting thing of like, I don't know if post-apocalypse,
Take your time.
post-apocalyptic like settings that like not only just on Earth, with sci-fi, but also there's a few that like happen in space basically. So like there's more technology available, but there's still like not as much an overriding civilization because of some
I
events
think
which
I
tags
think it
a
depends.
level that's interesting.
I think
Yeah.
it depends on what the objectives of the main characters would be, right? So something can feel apocalyptic regardless of scale. If your objective is literally like, stay alive, preserve our way of life, something very simple like that. So I
Right.
think, yeah, you can have it be in any setting and still have it kind of follow that same, theme.
Like a good example actually that I just remembered. I need to play it some more, but is Homeworld, because in the first Homeworld game, first mission's like, oh, go test out this faster than light thing that we just discovered. It's like, cool, it works, and then like they come back and the planet's just nuked. So then it's like we have the last like 8,000 people on other species. We got to get somewhere else. We got to book it because like
Book
So that's a good like post-apocalyptic. It doesn't feel as much as like that, but it's basically like an Exodus event where like everyone else is dead. You're the only ones left.
Definitely
Okay.
post-apocalyptic. I'm going to give
Yeah.
another one that's going to probably blow a couple people's minds and give some ancient core memories unlocked. Titan
Oh, no.
AE. That is definitely a post-apocalyptic setting for humanity because the Earth just gets destroyed by the weird energy things. By the way, I watched that movie recently. It does not hold up as well as you'd hope it would. It's
Oh,
got a lot
really?
of weird stuff going on in it.
I haven't seen it in forever, dude.
Yeah, that
I've
was a
never-
big part of my childhood. Oh, you'd
Yeah.
love it. It's a great sci-fi work.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the plot of the film is humanity is awesome, and we are starting to make waves amongst the stars. Unfortunately, the Earth has some sort of terrible thing happening to it that causes all of humanity to try to evacuate as quick as possible. And the main character's dad decides he's going to stay there and make the Titan AE, which is a device that's going to allow us to rebuild Earth after Earth gets blown up. And he unfortunately doesn't make it off the planet before everything bad happens, and now our character just bums it throughout the galaxy, doing odd jobs, being an oddity because people laugh at how stupid humans are. Until one day he retakes on the quest to find the Titan.
AE.
Yeah, AE for After Earth.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Oh,
I'm not
After Earth
ready.
is a post-apocalyptic story. Let's talk about After Earth.
After Earth with Will Smith is
Oh,
a
dude,
post-apocalyptic story.
We don't need to talk about
Okay.
After. Everyone knows
Question.
No one cares
Is
about
that the
After
Mormon
Earth.
movie
It's
or
not
is
After
that
talked
the
Earth-
about.
Scientologist movie?
possibly my bottom 10 movies that I've ever seen.
I do want to shout out here. Alex Gomez is completely correct. Titan AE is almost a masterpiece. It has all
I agree.
it has
I
all
like-
the things. It's got a
Oh, man,
bust
that
made out
movie
of marble.
bombed.
It's got beautiful gem work. It's got everything there, and then somebody tripped and dropped part of it, so it's like cracked through the middle. So you look at it, it's like KOTOR 2. Dang, this is half of a perfect game. It's just one of those things where you look at it like this could have been the greatest thing ever, but Titan AE just drops the bag at the end, and it's just so disappointing because there's so many little things. Like there's a race of beings that are made of pure energy, and they are trying to kill humanity for some reason. I don't want to spoil it for those who haven't seen it because I think that you should see it.
We were too awesome.
Yeah, we were too awesome. Pag, you should really watch this with your kid. It's a kid's movie. It's I think it was Ralph Bakshi's one of his last movies, right? Was it Bakshi? I
Yeah,
know
dude.
it was one of those guys who,
Ag's
huh?
child is a month old.
I know he's a month old, but like I'm
And-
saying,
He's
he's
not
older.
going to be
And-
Teach them while you're
Yeah,
young.
he
Just
needs
teach them
to
while
be
you're
ready.
young. Ageist.
Astro,
Just teach him.
you will, the kid will learn, okay?
Astro, mentally, Rooney's a month old too, and we let him watch movies.
Yo,
When I need my diaper changed.
I guarantee. No, that movie is older than you.
I think the movie's older than like everybody in the server but me and Grandma.
Kid.
Oh my god, it's older than me.
Is it really? No crap. All right.
It is.
Because I remember, I even read like the book as a kid. There was a dumbass book.
Okay. Kid, I wanted to say something before Astro so rudely interrupted me and made me lose my train of thought. So
Had comments then.
Yeah, what
Yes,
was that
it's
thing?
about-
Why don't you tell us?
Don Blue.
Ultra
yes.
Mega.
Yeah, how important could it be? Let's go.
Yeah,
Come on.
yeah. What do you got? What do you
Okay.
got?
Yeah, Ultra Mega. Let's
Ultra
get the screen
Mega
back on screen. All right, continue.
is a comic written by James Herron, and basically, okay, so the first issue starts out as your typical Ultraman type story. I mean, the story is styled after Ultraman. However, the thing is that after a kaiju attack, all the world gets destroyed and taken over by kaijus, and the story jumps forward in time after the first issue into like I think about several years after the events of the first issue, in which the world is pretty much in ruins, basically. So I would argue, because from what the story is setting up, they're trying to do post apocalypse.
Wait,
Right,
so it's
because-
like, is it like multiple generations after?
Not okay. No, when I say that it's trying to achieve that, currently it's not a post apocalypse because it does not take place generations after the first issue. But it seems as if that is what it's trying to do,
Okay.
based off of the fact that the main protagonist, which initially was the original Ultra Mega, turns out to be the son of the original Ultra Mega, whose father is presumed dead. Now, I mentioned this comic for 3 reasons. Number
Oh,
1,
boy.
I really like it. Number 2,
Okay.
it is probably one of the most unique apocalypse stories that I have read, although frankly I haven't read a lot of them, but as far as apocalypse stories go, that's probably like one of the coolest ones I've seen, because I don't think we've really seen a bunch of apocalypse stories featuring giant monsters, at least monsters of that scale. Because
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, because a lot of it is styled like an Ultraman story. I mean, even the name and the design of the Ultra Mega is
This
taken.
looks like edgy Ultraman.
I would say one thing real quick, and it's a real quick
Comment section
side.
already said that Alex
quick
Gomez
side.
already said that.
Yeah, no,
by
I'm
the way.
agreeing with Alex Gomez. He's right. Here you go, chat. I'm going to put it on screen a little bit.
All right.
Somehow. Keep going, Pops.
You go ahead and do that, Rooney, real quick. One thing I just wanted to note, and it's a real quick side note, doesn't really have to do with any thoughts on what you just described. It's just that when you want to write something, then you want to set it, and let's say it's apocalyptic, it's post-apocalyptic. Maybe you want it to be post-apocalyptic. Like, you don't have to worry too much about the actual timeline, right? Like, something real quick, like Thanos can snap his fingers and half of civilization disappears, and then you could call that post-apocalyptic, even though it didn't happen over a generation or over the world getting infected with the disease. It just happened because one guy made one decision and like it happened real quick. So like, you don't have to worry too much about like, oh well, it needs to be multiple generations. I know I brought that up before just as a thought, but it doesn't need to happen, over some long ass amount of time just for something to be considered apocalyptic versus post-apocalyptic. So I mean, just one thing to note, one thought that I had while you were talking about it, and I
Well,
thought
it's like the Rapture too. It's supposed to be
Yeah, right,
instantaneous, and
sure.
So I have actually something, maybe an interesting direction to take this. But first, something completely unrelated. Kid, it's TOO for two, not TO. Second of all,
it's
more
it's 5
interesting
o'clock.
thing
It's not
is
6:50.
that how do we define, post-apocalyptic? I'm not even gonna. We're gonna
Yeah,
move on from that.
what's that, Mr.
Versus
Two? What's that, Mr. Two?
post-apocalyptic.
Amazing.
The timeline is
Post
wrong.
revelation.
There's
Because
certain-
if it's
so we'd
several
already-
generations in like society,
So had
like
you been here on
Fallout-
time, we established that already.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we did.
Right, it's like
Bas-
minute
Basically,
one.
it's the relevance of the apocalypse in everybody's day-to-day life has faded into the background, and they are now rebuilding
enough.
society.
Fair
That
enough.
is, yeah, like
They may not have achieved the greatness of the previous civilization, but they also are not suffering to the point where they must dig through the dregs of that civilization.
yeah,
Gotcha. Okay.
probably like in Fallout terms, like the people.
That's
who
what I
live
was
in Hades
thinking of. I was
land.
thinking of Fallout terms because a lot of the talk,
Yeah.
Pop seemed to be saying it's like several generations. I'm like, well, I mean,
Oh, well,
Fallout
I was
has several generations, and there's like,
Yep.
the apocalypse is still like obviously very in the face of
Exactly.
everyone who.
Still
Yeah,
relevant.
it has to be
I
like
would-
relevant to their lives. That's
I would say the distinction that I would say as at a very basic level is like post apocalypse is when it's like it becomes a foundation myth rather than something that plays that big of a role. Post apocalypse, yeah, you know what I mean. It's still relevant.
No,
Okay.
yeah, I gotcha. Yeah.
Show up on time. Maybe you would have figured it out.
Yeah, maybe.
So I do think that I wanted to cover another interesting gray area. What is the difference between a post-apocalypse and a dystopia? Because I feel like a lot of people, because of things like Hunger Games and the what is that Divergent and that rise in weird teenage girl media, kind of get it mixed up.
Yeah,
So
we had like a decade of that.
Well,
This
I
is
feel like-
definitely
I feel like the difference is apocalypses can often lead to a good setting for a dystopia because while an apocalypse is supposed to be basically the end of a civilization or world or people, a dystopia specifically, it comes from, of course, utopia, where utopia is supposed to be from the. I think it's Greek, basically the best that everything can be. A dystopia is the worst things can be, which does not require necessarily for an entire civilization to be destroyed. You could write a story where you just society slowly becomes this over time. But with an apocalypse, that serves as a great reset. And the people who come into power will be the people who already have great power. And with this power, they can then create any sort of world they want to. And with when you couple it with the apocalypse, this means they can make the world be the worst it can be for everyone else except for themselves, and that's where dystopia will start to form. I think other versions of this would be House of the Scorpion, where there's like a giant war. The South America region gets split up into a bunch of different drug cartels, and these cartels rule with an iron fist. It's terrible for a lot of people, but for a lot of other people, life goes just swell. It's not a full apocalypse, but it becomes a dystopia quite.
Okay.
I would
do wanna
describe a
know real
dystopia
quick-
as a state of society as opposed to just a like like a state, an
Hey,
era in a society,
I-
as opposed to just a.
I would say a dystopia requires a society. An apocalypse does not. Is one probably major
Yeah.
thing.
It's a
Okay.
Like
fantastic point.
dystopia, needs to have a set of rules, and those rules need to be like one of the main reasons it's so fucked. Whether it be because they are so harshly enforced, or because they are so aggressively ignored and able to be ignored.
All right,
like
real
Mad
quick.
Max.
I think that's true, but also another important thing is that like I'd say a lot of apocalypses are because of like kind of natural events, whether it be like
Mhm.
it rarely I'd say apocalypse, I guess other than nuclear, like
Right.
usually it's some like outside event, and granted nuclear is of course like a big one of course with like fallout and stuff, but it's a lot more of outside forces like it's basically I guess done by outside forces where dystopia is usually like an internal force of like its
Say
own
that.
government doing that.
Because a lot of
Listen,
internal things can corrupt and destroy you too.
Des, we
Well,
went
sure,
over this.
An
but
apocalypse to create a dystopia.
If you had just listened earlier, we went over the different types of inciting events and causes for. I guess they could be causes for a dystopia, but also for an apocalypse is things that include, like sci-fi. Man creates things that he cannot hope to control, things like that, and it causes issues. So I know where you're coming from, and I do want to note real quick in the Hunger Games, I'm not sure if it was a disaster event or if it's set so far in the future and the author believed in climate change, but the geography of the United States did change. If you look up maps of what the world was supposed to look like at that time, it's like the northeast coast is like entirely flooded. Like the oceans look different. There's islands where it used to be connected to the mainland. So I don't know. Maybe it could technically be post-apocalyptic based on a natural event, but my idea for like why you could make an argument that say Fahrenheit 451 or 1984 is technically post-apocalyptic is because there wasn't not because there was like a mass or because everyone became a zombie or aliens invaded. It's more because of like the system that you're used to living under is now completely gone. It's been entirely destroyed, whether it took time or whether it happened right away through like a coup or something. But
Yeah.
it's something I wanted to bring up and consider because it kind of brings into question what you might define as an apocalypse. Because a lot of the time, if you narrow it down, it is like people's way of life becomes completely different. The things that people believe in are different. The world that you're living in is different.
I
And I
think
thought,
I would
in a
disagree that
specifically
those are.
destructive manner. If
I
it's
don't
if
know.
it's a specifically destructive manner, that's when it becomes apocalyptic. Like if
Yeah.
And I also think that the difference is apocalypses are singular events that you could point to as when it started and when it either ended or the
Right.
ramifications have
Okay.
ended. Whereas dystopian things are ongoing and need something to change. You're not going to have an apocalypse doesn't happen if the nukes keep going off every 5 minutes. That is completely different. That's constant apocalypses. Whereas a
Okay.
dystopian setting, you have to overthrow or change the thing to change it from dystopian to able to recover. Because an apocalypse allows an automatic post-apocalypse to occur. Whereas dystopians, you have to try and do something to have a post-dystopian setting.
Okay.
That's actually a good point. I think that's actually a much better definition. Is like a
Yeah.
gradual change for dystopia, where apocalyptic is more a like one-time special event.
Yeah, because with dystopias and like Fahrenheit 451, there is a continuity of society. It doesn't stop functioning; it just goes bad. And I feel like that ending of society and civilization is an important part of what makes an apocalypse an apocalypse. Without that,
Well,
it's just things, society.
Right.
I'm not even sure if I would say society making bad decisions leading to something like Fahrenheit 451. At least from an internal perspective, it makes them go happy. But
Yeah,
with like Brave New World, they are very happy with it. But
I was gonna say actually, I was gonna mention. I wasn't sure if it would be relevant, but it definitely is for this discussion. Like Deus Ex, with Deus Ex, a lot of it is like the Illuminati behind the scenes, or subtly manipulating events so that they gain more and more control, especially with the new cybernetics causing social issues, and that's a lot more in line with a dystopia where they're using kind of more subtle means to over time shift opinion versus like the apocalyptic events of
Okay.
something like that.
You could reverse it and just use renaissances and sci-fi stories. Well,
I don't know. But okay, even if we can't actually agree on Fahrenheit 451 being technically post-apocalyptic, the author, great author of all time, he's one of the authors of all time, Ray Bradbury. He actually did write a post-apocalyptic, very short story, and I believe it's called Short Rains May Come, or The Rain May Come, or something like that. And it was at the time where nuclear fallout and nuclear war was a legitimate threat to civilization. At least people thought it was. And the entire story is very kind of sad, depressing. It's a few pages, and it's only about like a family that survived the nuclear fallout, and they have their little safe house, but they're all long dead because of the radiation and everything. And the only living character is the family dog, who finds his way back to the house and basically just dies once he gets in there of cancer. And I believe it's kind of worth mentioning that, you need to take into account the different ideas that you want to express with a post-apocalyptic setting or a story like that, because that's like, a cautionary tale plays into politics,
Mhm. Yeah,
So
but
I
you could
think
also write easily write like a more hopeful setting where it's like this is the post-apocalypse, but what came before was kind of shitty, and so now it's something able to grow out of this in a more positive light. So you could really like make it pretty much do whatever you want.
I
Yeah,
think it
exactly.
I think it depends on the era that these people came from, because at that point the U.S. was, riding the wave coming off of World War II. We were back-to-back World War champions. Everyone's looking up. And so if you were going to write something in that time versus like, whatever you perceived as the modern era, it was going to be a lot worse.
Mhm.
Versus now, where people write them as these kind of escapist adventure stories, because, I don't want to get political, but like a lot of people are miserable because of the system they live under today.
Mhm.
I do want to take one quick side tangent. The back-to-back World War champs. So, back in high school, when I graduated, my family said you get to one of two things: either you can get a trip to Europe or a car. And my best friend, who's in the server with us, I'm not going to dox him, but me and him went to Europe. There's a picture of me and him on a boat together. It's great. He's a great guy. While
Was
we were in
OJ
Europe, well, yeah, don't worry. While
Yeah,
we were
you
in
weren't
Europe,
supposed to dox the friend. What the hell?
I didn't put any pictures of him. I don't think any of you know him, actually. So, while we're in Europe, we're at the Eiffel Tower. And there's these
Yep, all the
Algerian
French people.
dudes who are selling like little crappy keychains. And one of
I
our
think I-
ladies bought it from them. You never do that. If somebody's hawking stuff and you buy something, the rest of them flock towards you. Now, so they like were
Yeah, it's
harassing them. And now you got me. I'm a high school kid. I'm a big guy. Besides just being fat, I'm 6 foot tall, and I usually have some of the most muscle among people around me. So here
Man's
we
a
are in
unit.
Europe. There's a whole bunch of people harassing all the ladies in our group, and I'm a high school kid, so I'm young, dumb, and full of cum. So like, I'm gonna go fight these dudes, these 6 foot tall Algerian guys. So
Hell yeah.
I remember handing my bags to my friend and going over. My teacher's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm gonna go fight these guys." He's like, "No, you can't. We're gonna get arrested here." I'm like, "We're back-to-back World War champs. They ain't gonna stop us." Full of confidence, full of just not like any sense of irony. I was ready to go have a fist fight at the Eiffel Tower with these Algerian guys. Before I could get there, though, a dozen French police officers came in on bicycles and chased them away. And it was so funny because they book it and they start running. One of the guys runs into a porta potty, and I see the French guy on the bicycle. He parks the bicycle, sits down, and lights a cigarette while watching it waiting. I'm like, this is a comedy sketch. I love it.
Oh man,
Did you win?
yo, we got to get a kid. We
Oh,
got to
you
get a King of Candor lore segment every podcast.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was
the
hard.
new fantasy.
Oh man, bro, you put them back on the banana boat, dude. It was over for them.
It was so funny. I just looking back and I'm like, when I was like 18, I'm like, you idiot. I don't care how strong you think you are. A dozen guys from North Africa will gonna kick your ass. But I'm ready to fight them. It was so funny. Oh gosh.
You thought the embassy was gonna come and get you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Canadian embassy's down the street. They'll help us out. Good times.
Looping back into the
Man.
original topic,
Sure.
there is this other comic called Shakara or Shakara, I don't know how you pronounce it, written by Robbie Morrison. And this is a question for you, King. So basically the story begins when an alien civilization pretty much destroys the planet. And within the first 5 panels of the story, the main human character gets his skull crushed by an alien. So
Okay.
I have to ask,
How many panels are
given that what?
how many panels are there then if he's the main guy?
Oh, I lied. He's not the main guy, but the last human,
Okay.
he dies within the first 5 panels. So I have to ask, is this post or is this post?
You've given me no context. You told me that
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's
you
okay,
said that
okay,
all humanity's
look.
dead. Well, hang on, all humanity's dead. That's the start of the story. Then it's clearly a just an apocalyptic story. You got to tell me who the character we actually follow is. Just because we followed this human initially for 2 or 3 panels, heck, you could even follow a character. I'm not going to spoil it. There's a very famous crime film out there that follows a cop and a criminal, both undercover for each other. And halfway through the film, one of them gets capped, and you're like, what the hell just happened? And a side character is actually the main character now. Those of you who know the film know what I'm talking about. I don't want to spoil it for anybody.
Not halfway.
Oh, apologies.
Yeah.
I kind of want to
I
pivot
can't tell you
the
the name.
conversation away from something where we need a lot of specifics of the story. And I think it would be interesting to talk a bit about when it comes to an apocalypse or post-apocalypse or post-post-apocalypse. How much for a story in it? How much of an explanation of the apocalypse do you think the audience is owed?
You need to know
None.
what
Literally
got them
none.
to this
The
state.
audience
Yeah.
isn't owed fuck.
Yeah, the
Well,
audience
that's part
doesn't.
of-
Only thing that needs is
I want-
if it changes like our world, like the reason Fallout's important. I need to know that nukes dropped. Why? Because there's irradiated monsters, and it's our world, but not. That's the only reason you need to know that nukes happened. Anything else could have happened in Fallout. The reason you need to know that the I Am Legend vampire virus happened is because that's why there are vampire monsters hanging out in the buildings, and that's why we can't go out at night. That's all you need to know. The bare minimum to get you set up here. Everything else doesn't need to be told.
Time.
Yeah, if it works for your story and that's what your story is about, then sure, you can go. But the audience doesn't need to know literally anything. Like preserving the mystery works very well for tons of stories.
Well,
people
that's part of
love
what
it.
Only what needs to be explained needs to be explained. You know,
Yeah.
Fallout really needs to explain it because, of course, like a big part of the first Fallout game is like, why are there vaults?
Yeah,
Like you have to
what the fuck
explain
is going
that.
on?
And
Yeah.
like
No,
the
no,
vaults, of course, are going to be a big part of like, oh yeah, we knew we were going to get nuked like a long time ago. So like we knew it was coming, so we prepared. You know, so
And then
And I
there
want to give a
was
specific example to help with this. I don't remember if it's in the film, but I'm pretty sure they never tell you what the apocalypse is in A Boy and His Dog. It's just the end of the world happened, and you're following these characters through it. Mad Max is a great example, actually. You never know what causes
Yes.
the end of the world in Mad Max. It just ended. Everything sucks now. And that's not necessary. It's just
It is
told
implied-
everything sucks and everybody's in, I guess, BDSM gear is the only thing that survives the apocalypse.
and motorcycles.
Oh,
You forgot the
and
motorcycles.
And
Yes.
boom boxes and
Yes.
music.
I got
guitars.
a great example for you though, because I would say falls about in the halfway point versus like, you know, considering how relevant the main event is, because we know that a war happened, but we don't know who started it, right?
Mhm.
So we know it was there. We know that it happened, but we don't know the details. I would say an extreme example of a good, possibly great story where it's never made explicit at all why the world is the way it is actually a very simple story called The Road, which is a movie. The book is better, but it's a movie, and it's a post-apocalyptic story in the States about a dude and his kid who was born right after the apocalypse happened. And all we know is that like all animals are extinct, the world is completely burnt out, everything's destroyed. And there's roving bands of raiders, marauders, people that still have access to certain resources. But, you know, everyone's like vicious, deadly. Everything is dead as far as you can tell. And like it just happened. And you don't know how it happened. You don't know what happened. You just know the world is the way that it is now. and you know it's post-apocalyptic, but you don't need to know every detail behind the lore. You know, it's a backdrop for a good story. It's not always like the story.
I feel like that's a good parallel to Fallout again, because we have everything from 76, which there's a lot to be said about that game, but it takes place 20 years after the apocalypse. We have 1 and 2, which I think 1 is somewhere around closer to the apocalypse than 2 is like
When does the
100 years
apocalypse
after.
happen?
Something like that. But then we end
71,
up
I
with
think, is 72 is when the first one, and then I think the
Because
second one
there
takes
was like
place
200
significantly after, because one of the people you meet gets like really old, and then also I think Sandy Shades or Shady Sands, I mean, is a lot bigger in the second one than in the first. Because in the first game,
the first game you meet
it's like a
Tandy,
small
who's a
town.
16-year-old girl, and by the time you meet her in the second
Yeah.
game, she's president of the NCR. She's an old lady.
But there's all that, and then there's Fallout 3, New Vegas 4. Those take place 200 years after. I agree that, yeah, for those stories, we only need to know, oh, there was an apocalypse. It was like nuclear in nature, so now there's a whole bunch of radiation. But then we end up with
Yeah,
the Fallout show, and it becomes extremely crucial to the characters that we follow exactly what happened to cause the apocalypse. They have personal connections. Do you think it's a good idea for a story to then delve into the specifics like that of the apocalypse, or would you caution against?
I think if it definitely is relevant to the narrative and the way that the characters are going to see the world and act, then yeah, for sure. Because it's not like everyone is removed from the apocalypse. Like the ghoul, he saw it happen, right?
Right.
So it's still important to the story. It's still relevant to how they act and everything. But it doesn't have to be, which is why I say it falls into that midline category where like we know it happened, we don't know the exact details.
I was gonna say
know-
there was still like a good amount of detail, it seems like, about like the apocalypse. Like they already established in the first game, I know, specifically that like the invasion of Canada happened, the
Pre-apocalypse
of course,
stuff.
the US. Well, right, but that's like it's stuff that leads to the apocalypse.
Not
at
at
very
all.
Only in the most
Canada deserved
technical
it.
sense, in that it
And why
happened
I
before the
screwed up
apocalypse.
there. Yeah, what I meant was that like in the past of the franchise within the video game universe, it was never all that important. Like it happened, you didn't know how it started, but you know it happened. So you know it was nuclear, you know it was radiation poisoning and all this crazy creatures got created and everything. But within the universe of the show itself, I think it's important because number one, we've got a character who lived through it, and then yeah, like I said before, there are characters whose character arcs and stories are affected by it. So I think it's important in the show. Yeah, for sure.
I was gonna say I do think you get quite a good amount of detail, not to the level of the show, of course. I'm not saying
Not at
that.
all. You get no detail
you
in
get
the
a-
games.
Yeah, you get no detail. Canada happened, I think, a decade or two before the Great War.
Oh, it was a
Alaska
decade
happened
before,
a
okay.
couple years before the war, but was completely over by the time the war happened.
Interesting.
know.
Okay, well then I was misinterpreting what I saw in the first game then. Then yeah, I mean it regardless, it does make a lot more sense to delve a lot more in detail on the show, just because of course, like you were saying, with the ghoul story.
Yeah, and I would
requires
say
that.
there's no shame in creating a universe, whether it is super relevant or whether it's not relevant at all. I think there's no
No,
shame in taking either side of that, which is one thing I did want to bring up to our resident author Peg.
Yes.
Not that you have to spoil your whole book or anything, but do you think either strategy might be superior to the other? Because it's just a thought I had.
Which two strategies specifically?
Basically having people know everything about how and why the apocalypse happened versus just setting them in a world where it already happened and that's all you need.
Oh no.
Well,
Repeat.
yeah, poor Pops. Gone too soon. But at least he got his
Gone
question
but
out.
not forgotten.
So it
Up
just
for
kind of depends on the type of story you're trying to tell, really. If what you're trying to tell is kind of an unraveling thing where your characters are trying to figure out what the hell happened, of course you're not going to want to tell them up front, and that's going to make that the best thing for that story. But if you're trying to have something where it's like where it's like a commentary on some specific ideology or something like that. Like if you're trying to say, yeah, communism ended the world, then yeah, I mean, a central part of it is like you got to tell people communism ended the world, or else it just ain't gonna work. Your whole message ain't gonna get through. It all depends on what type of story you're trying to tell. There's not
Okay.
really a best. Um, I mean, in my like setting, the like destruction of Earth is like something that's far, far in the past, and characters just kind of mention it in passing, and I don't really ever explain how it happens unless I write a story that's about how it happens, because it's not something that needs to be included. It's not a important to the story, you know.
Okay.
Right.
I respect that too. And yeah, sorry.
Right? The fact that it happened is more important than how it happened.
Exactly. Yes.
And I
Yeah,
think
it
that's
caused
how a
it
lot of
caused the human
apocalypses-
diaspora, and that's all that needs to be understood. It caused this.
I
I
don't
Yeah.
think
know if
that's
this is
talking about that. I do want to tie it into the next topic. Why do people really get drawn to these stories, and what makes them interested in them? Why is making your story a post-apocalyptic thing more interesting than simply having it be a turbulent time, or a systems collapse, or a governmental shift?
Oh boy, have I got one for you.
All right, hit me with
So I
one.
was
I
taking notes on this stuff earlier. Let me see. Number one reason that I have is probably very basic, but I would say it just appeals to kind of the human ego, which is, can be very simply put into words as like, every generation looks at the next generation and goes, it's the end of the world, you know?
Oh,
But I
yeah.
would say
Zoomers.
so
there's a
true.
lot of ways that people can relate to characters in a post-apocalyptic setting. I'm reading my notes. I would say, I mean, on a very basic level, the ego appeal is that, you look at somebody who's surviving a post-apocalyptic setting and you go, well, I could do that. Or, even by definition, if most of your people are dead and you're one of the last ones alive, then like you have value, So I think on a very basic level, a lot of like large scale disaster stories appeal to something like that people feel in them. They want to feel important. They want to go on an adventure. They want to have that, that freedom. So I think it's survived the times because it's just something that appeals to a lot of like a very basic human notions or part of your nature.
On that
I want to go deeper
topic
into
of
that
like
and say that it
natural
has to do a lot with the.
disasters, I
Oh,
I just want to add to the idea that a lot of it is also uh, the natural disaster apocalypses. They feel like they tend to want to explore natural forces and how humanity has to interact and either defeat or learn to live with them.
Mm.
Uh, with earthquakes, it's something that a lot of people end up having to deal with in their daily life, and some of them can be absolutely catastrophic. And so a lot of these apocalypse stories serve, or specifically natural disaster apocalypse stories, serve as ways to essentially forewarn, but also remember that they happen and what you can expect and need to be prepared for in these cases. Or with like flood stories, especially a lot of cultures that would live near rivers that were prone to flooding, they would be especially prone to developing flood myths, which would, on one hand,
Huh.
warn, hey, what happened? This could go wrong, but also serves as a way to remind people, hey, this is a thing that we have to deal with. Uh, not quite consistently. Consistent flood rivers tended to have their own things, but if it floods inconsistently, it's sort of a way to remind people, hey, we need to be prepared. We need to take the proper precautions to ensure we are not utterly destroyed.
yeah. I would go
Uh,
even deeper into what Pop said too, and say that a lot of it has to do with appealing to the indomitable will of the human spirit. Especially
Kind
with
of,
like
yeah.
natural disaster. Yeah, especially with like the natural disaster types, because a lot of it is just trying to overcome a tragedy, right? It's kind of like what was it called? Not maybe the hero's journey, but on a much larger scale, where instead of just one character, it's an entire people, or at least a
Yeah, I would
handful of
say
people.
it's another facet of kind of what the average Joe wants to see in himself, right? So who doesn't love a story about, like, you know, a badass dude going on an adventure and surviving and becoming a hero? Maybe, like, it's all things that people want to see within themselves, and you can kind of escape into that. And again, like I mentioned before, a lot of people these days are looking for, you know, some semblance of escapism, some way to look at themselves as relating to a character who maybe has it better than them, regardless of the circumstances. And, you know, a lot of people kind of, again, little political to say, but a lot of people are kind of like to these days thinking like, oh, well, things would be better if, you know, we had a reset or it fell apart. And you know, I do feel like the climate of how people are feeling in real life and what they want and how they have issues with their life experience right now is playing into the type of media that they want to escape into, which is why I think there's been a bit of a resurgence, you know?
Yeah, and on that same
Yeah, a
point,
lot of
this
it
is
sounds
why
like very
zombie
villain-esque type monologuing.
Yeah, well, hang on. On that same point, that's why a lot of
All right,
zombie
brother.
media used to be so popular back when I was in middle school, because society was at a good point where it's really good. So people had this idea that, hey, what if society collapsed? Could I survive? Am I strong enough to get through a zombie apocalypse? Can I handle an apocalyptic setting? So that's another thing that these settings fulfill is, could I not just survive an apocalypse? Could I thrive? Do I have that ability? You know, as you kids say, do I got that dog in me?
The
I,
sauce,
You
you
know
got
what,
the sauce, bro.
there's another very interesting thing about apocalypse stories. It's like when the chips are down, when it's not easy to act civilized, will you still act civilized? Will you still, you know, help your fellow man out, or are you going to, you know, basically kick him down the road for an extra for an extra chicken leg type thing?
That's another way to look
That's
at it.
another
people.
interesting thing, and I think Fallout is uniquely, and maybe other apocalypse stories have done it, but I just am not aware. But Apocalypse Fallout has an especially interesting way of doing this, where because of the vaults, where you know
Yeah.
people live in such pampered environments where they don't have to deal with, you know, the death claws or any of the mutants or like any of the factions. Like they're in a unique position to be more um
Snobby.
isolated. Yeah, more snobby and isolated.
Well,
So that,
dude,
you
that's
know,
one thing.
inevitably in the stories,
That's
exactly, privilege. So that when they go out into the world, they have an interesting you know, an interesting perspective that you can follow then with like how do they deal with
okay.
this challenge? Because it's
Well, that's
it's kind of like the theoretical of like thinking to
It-
yourself,
yeah.
and I'm sure some people do it. It's like, take the modern man. What are they gonna do in 580 or BC or whenever? You know, because it's so
Yeah, 'cause all
different.
the
You know, you
people.
don't have any of the amenities. You know, you have to. It's a completely different culture. You know, it's much brutaler. You
well,
know,
man.
all that type of
Part of
stuff.
that, because when you look at, like, you know, the people in the vault in the show, at least our main Vault 33, where our girl Lucy with her massive eyes comes from. She's raised and propagandized to act in kind of I don't want to say like a policing kind of like Karen manner, but, you know, very courteous, very respectable, very also, you know, morally upright. And I think part of what made her a great character was, despite, you know, getting out into the kind of crappy world that she was in and being exposed to horrors and everything, like at the end of the show, she's still not cursing. She's still like, okie dokie, you know, because she was characterized as somebody who was going to hold that as a very valuable thing.
Mhm.
Right.
And
She
I
holds
think
Yeah,
it.
part of
not
that,
fall into
I think that's why
cynicism.
she was a good character, at least,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
She's very well written.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah.
I would just like
Yeah, if
to
nobody.
say something that connects to what Kid said about the zombie apocalypse, and it's. I think it's useful to think back to what purpose did stories serve? What purpose do stories serve? They serve to essentially retain societal information, but also to forewarn the youth, to pass warning and knowledge from the
I
elders
think
to the younger. And I
I
think a
think
lot
Yeah,
of
if
the zombie
someone.
apocalypse stories, the natural disaster apocalypse stories, a lot of them seem to have a lot of messages about the need to not get too used to society. You need to be able to retain a lot of skills in because you never know when you might need them.
I
It
think it
doesn't.
depends on the climate of the times when the story came out, really. based on, because whatever message it might send could be different based on what people are starting to worry about at the time. Like a lot of books are like looked at as foreshadowing because they predicted certain political or societal, I guess you'd call them, like, patterns. But I think it totally is I think it totally depends as far as the message it's trying to show you. Depends on what time it came out, almost.
Yeah, if no one was alive to keep you accountable, are you going to keep yourself accountable? That's something I've been wanting to mention for a while now. When it comes to apocalypse stories, for example, there is one in
Dude.
particular called Hellstar Remina. It's a manga by Junji Ito. It's one of my favorite of his collection, and it deals with this. And this is not post-apocalyptic. This is just apocalyptic, but it's basically the reaction of humankind to this approaching force of destruction that is here to eat the Earth. This massive Galactus-like star that is going to destroy the world, and all of civilization around. Okay, because it's very tragic. You see, because there is a girl called Remina, and she becomes famous because she, her scientist father discovered a star, and he named it after her daughter, and by extension, her daughter became a celebrity. And then, when the Remina star began approaching Earth and threatened to destroy humanity, people started to turn against the little girl, and the little girl like had nothing to do with it. Like, she's completely innocent in this, and she has to go through all these things. And the one person that actually sees her as a human being as opposed to just a celebrity, that guy who she ends up falling in love with, she ends up dying, taken by the people who idolize her, worship her, and at the very
Get
end
to
of
the
the book
point.
demonize her. And so the whole point is
Yeah,
that
I was forgetting what I was saying, dude. What's your point? Listen.
There's maybe a point in here. Maybe.
Here,
I'll
Okay,
give it
I'm
like
No,
a
getting there. I'm
he's
getting there.
got it. He's got it.
go to it. Go
He's
on.
got it because
Okay,
it
so the
depends
whole
on the
point,
scale, motherfucker.
this whole yeah, the whole point of what I'm trying to say here is that when arguing like what are these kinds of stories for, what Tio said earlier, this one in particular is to remind people not to like lose their humanity once stuff like this happens. When we're faced against impossible odds. I think that's the important takeaway here, because, like I said, if no one is around to keep you accountable, will you keep yourself accountable? A lot of people seem to
Hello.
think that the answer is no,
Sorry, but
but
Sorry,
a
one
lot
of
of
those
people
animals is
seem to think
escaping.
like the answer is no.
Based.
Good point, Rooney. I will have to disagree, though. Until Wendigoon makes his next Junji Ito video, I won't have an opinion on this. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, yeah. So a lot of
He
people
talked
say
about
no, and it's due
Spiral,
to
so now
this,
I can have an opinion on it, thankfully. By the way, Wendigoon, if somehow you're watching
yeah.
this, I would kill to have you on. I would love to talk the Bible with you, man. He's so knowledgeable about that stuff, and we'd have such a fun discussion. But
yeah.
yes.
Also,
Um,
I want
a
to
lot
say the Pops was sharing a peacock.
Yeah, I saw that.
All right, he was showing us his massive peacock.
His cock.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
It's all
So,
posted in Council text chat.
Yeah, a lot of
Excellent.
people seem to be cynical about this type of stuff because, like Pop said, a lot of it has to do with, he said he wasn't going to get political, but I'm going to do it. A lot of people, are very cynical due to, the world we live in and the people ruling over us. But I believe, me personally, I believe that if an apocalypse were to happen, I think we could pull through. We just need a bunch of guns.
Well, no, the issue with it is everybody fantasizes about living in a post-apocalyptic world, but they don't want to take into account living in the apocalypse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everyone
Like,
wants to be the one to build the post-apocalypse.
Yeah, everyone's very.
Kinda, yeah.
That
Lady
like I said,
Sans.
that's why I think Fallout is uniquely placed to like kind of show that, because again they have that like pre-civilization to be thrown in there where it
Oh
adds an
yeah, what's the
interesting
quote?
dynamic.
Everyone wants to save the world, they just don't agree on how.
Well, I mean,
Well,
not
I
only
would say
that, it's just
Fallout did
for
it
Fallout, it's
particularly
just
well
like, do you want to?
because
Are you gonna like make your life slightly less miserable in this just miserable setting? And and no one's gonna stop you. No one's gonna care. No one's gonna know. Um,
I think a thing that Fallout did that's totally unique, given the timeline of events, was that having the element of the vaults as a remnant of the older civilization
Exactly.
that produced actual people that might know the lore, that might know the background, the
Exactly.
history, have that perspective. It's a really interesting way to kind of still keep it relevant regardless of the timeline. And I like that they did that, because I don't know if there's another story with the dynamic like that.
It's getting spicy. We need girl boss to survive the apocalypse.
Oh
Oh,
my
no.
goodness! You need to watch the last stream that I was not on, but that I probably agree with everything they said. I don't
Well-
know. I haven't watched it yet. I'm sorry, kid. I'll do
That's
it.
why
I
she was a great
swear.
character. That's why
Yeah, I'm
Lucy
pretty
was a
sure.
great character versus not just a girl boss. Because, like
Yeah.
Rune said, when you have to take into account accountability, but there's nobody to hold you accountable, you know what I mean? She's a
Yeah.
person who actually still
She
does
sticks
hold
by her
herself
guns.
to a
That's
certain
what makes her so
certain
admirable as
standard.
a protagonist. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's why
Also,
she's
she's
a
pretty.
character.
She's a well-written character. She's a very well. I really like her.
So I
We
do
see
wanna-
she has some skills that you need to survive, but she doesn't have all the skills. She'll learn some of them, and we see her learn some of what she needs
I
to
would say
survive in this new world.
she has the training, but not the experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Theoretical knowledge can only take you so far. You need experience.
Speaking of experience, segueing into, I want to talk about some of the oldest apocalyptic literature that we have. That's actually what you could consider an actual story instead of just mythologies. The oldest, according to Wikipedia, that you can cite is Lord Byron's poem "Darkness" from 1816, which is in the
That's a good
Prisoner
one.
of Chillon collection. It
That's a
basically
good
talks
one.
about how one man survives after the world without summer. You know, that thing that Krakatoa caused that we mentioned earlier.
I was
It's
gonna
talking-
say that's the event I was talking about. I knew
Yes.
Byron lived through it.
Yep, he wrote about it, and he talked about how basically, if the world is gone and you're the last person in it, how would you feel the emotions in it? That's a fantastic post-apocalyptic story, and it shows the trend that people start thinking about. How do you deal with society if society is gone one day? Besides just the whole books of Revelation where the apocalypse is going, what happens if you live past it? Because that wasn't really a thing that was considered a lot back then. Because nobody expected a world-ending event to hit and not end the world. They didn't expect to be the ones left around. And because, the
There-
apocalypse
Like the
comes from
10,000 years
Revelations.
in the Bible. Like the 10,000 years.
Well, again,
There's a
that's
great
different,
quote
though.
from I believe it's from that poem.
Mhm.
But I read about it, and it was put in a book that I wish I could find the book, but I gave it back to my girlfriend, so I don't know the exact quote. But it opened a chapter about the Donner Party, where they started to do their thing, quote unquote. And I believe it was a Byron poem, and it said, "And the meek shall devour the meek, or the meager shall devour the meager," which it's like it's a horror story. Like, people are going to be driven to extremes. They're going to have to eat each other. Everything. It's one of those, like, post-apocalyptic stories from back in the day where people didn't really understand what it meant to live through something like that, or at least not something to that extent. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's because a lot of the times
Which
when people read the book of Revelations, they assume that they're going to be on the good side of that. They're going to live through it, and the people who are suffering don't deserve to be sympathetic. And it's not really until the Enlightenment that you see people having, ironically, sympathy for the devil, which is a fascinating concept because if you ask me, the devil is one of the saddest characters in all of reality because, man, I guarantee God would forgive him if he asked, but he's too prideful and sinful to ask. And that subject matter has become such a... I know you don't like it, but you're an idiot. So
Oh, shut up.
you're just
Hey, I'm
wrong.
not gonna. Hey, if you want to feel
The
sympathy for the
orthodox,
little
bro.
ontological depiction of evil, then go right ahead. I'm not gonna bow down and get a mark of the beast. Screw you. I'm gonna go to
I said
heaven.
bow down. I said I
That's
feel
not
bad
what
for
he
him.
said.
No,
But
that's
all
not the
right.
point.
Wow.
Sounds like we have a good
That's not the
topic
point.
for
All
a
right, next
stream
week we're
when
going to
Husband
discuss
Hotel
religion,
Season 2
everybody.
is announced.
I got get me
Can't
monetized
wait.
this
It
week
goes
I can
so
be
well.
yeah, get me monetized this week by watching all my videos. So next week I can be demonetized and banned from YouTube. Let's go.
Sure.
Let's
So,
go.
but the reason I bring
I'm
it up
getting
is
a mansion in heaven. You're getting a hut.
yeah, but no. So the reason it's important to bring that up is thinking about the fact that what if you did survive the apocalypse comes about from the ideas of, well, what if evil, should we sympathize with them? I don't agree with sympathizing with evil, of course, for all the ideas, but leading down this train of thoughts that the Enlightenment leads us towards, that's how you get to really interesting ideas. That's how you get to post-apocalyptic things. Because what if you're not taken up into heaven? And that's where we get to some of the funniest post-apocalyptic media, the Left Behind series. That's the idea is the rapture. The rapture, which is a uniquely American concept, by the way, where everybody who's good disappears, and then only evil and kind of good people are left. So they are. Go ahead.
So it's like you can still be redeemed even if you're not immediately up there. Okay.
Exactly.
That's the idea of the book, at least.
Yeah, and it's really funny
Wasn't
because
wasn't there chick tracks made about it, or am
yes,
I
I was going to say
There's
this
been
inspired-
some
There has
tracks,
been
yeah.
an abundant amount of chick tracks made about that. I have read them all, by the way. I love them.
Why would you admit to that, Rudy? You could just said nothing.
Because
There's a
they're
bunch of
funny.
media.
They're funny.
Oh, there's so much media that uses the rapture and the ideas behind it. And my favorite piece of media about the rapture is Left Behind: Eternal Forces. It's a Christian real-time strategy game developed in 2006.
No way.
Yes, it is a
No way.
Oh,
You're
fuck.
trolling.
Yep.
This
Oh,
isn't
great.
real. This isn't real.
you'll
I'm not
like-
looking it
you'll
up.
like-
Oh, no,
This
it's
isn't
real. I can.
You're gaslighting me. I refuse to believe. I simply refuse.
There's four.
I reject
There's
your
four-
reality.
it's got
Atheist.
4 games in total.
It's awesome, bro.
Yeah, so the idea is, and it's a
Peak
really
fiction for
interesting
real.
mechanic, actually. It's if you're looking at the world studying of like RPGs, this game is ironically important because it has the idea of something from Dishonored. You know how if you kill too many people, the world goes to crap, which makes the levels
Oh yeah,
harder?
the chaos mechanic.
That mechanic
Yes.
is in this game. So the nicer you are to people while
Really?
you're going around fighting the United Nations, the easier the maps are going to be, and the more people you can save and bring to heaven with you. And every time you kill somebody, another one of your people are forced to go to hell unless you can redeem them for killing. So it's a really interesting mechanic there. It's terribly coded from what I've seen, and it doesn't play very well, but it's a very funny concept. It did well enough that it led to a sequel, Left Behind: Tribulation Forces. So Eternal Forces turned into Tribulation Forces. Now, as I told people in the pre-chat, how do you follow this up? Well, obviously you have the third one, Left Behind 3, Rise of the Antichrist.
Oh, come on.
It's a great name.
That's gonna be like the third movie in Mel Gibson's trilogy of
Oh, I
Jesus.
can't wait. And then the final game.
Trilogy of
Yeah. The final game is Left Behind 4, World at War.
Part
Which
4.
is really
Part 4
interesting.
is Mormons.
Exactly. It's really interesting because that means that they had to have beat the Antichrist for there to be another game. So I'm really curious how they square that away.
They killed the Antichrist based. I want to play that game now. I want to kill the Antichrist.
Of course you do.
He really is the final
I hate
boss,
the
bro.
Antichrist.
Yeah,
I hate the Antichrist.
he really is. So yeah, with
He is.
that, I think that going to something earlier we talked about, the reason there's such a resurgence of them recently is because people think a societal collapse is coming. Anytime you see people thinking a societal collapse is on the way, that leads to a rise in these stories. Like I said, back when I was in middle school, this is 2008.
Mm.
You're looking at the recession starting to happen. You're looking at the war on terror causing things happen. You're looking at all these terrible
Yep.
situations, which is why zombie media picked up. Because the idea of, can I survive this apocalypse? Everybody sees it coming. It's ironic because the dot-com,
Yep.
the big bubble, the housing collapse, we saw it coming for decades. It's literally a slow-moving apocalypse that took everybody and caused the greatest financial destruction since the Great Depression. But we all
And
knew
as
it
we all
happened.
know,
2012.
and as we all know,
2012.
zombies are an allegory for homeless people.
That's why
I
it's
mean,
more real.
I live near Portland. I can't disagree.
Well,
Have you guys
joke,
seen
but you're not entirely
2012?
wrong. Well, hang on one second, Ronnie. You're not entirely wrong. Zombies are actually an allegory, which is even more potent these days, for consumerism. They're an allegory for people who mindlessly
Yeah.
buy and consume things, which is really funny that they had these thoughts and problems in 2008, and here we are almost 2 decades later, and we're still dealing with consumers.
Yep.
Yet Russia invaded Georgia.
Black
The
Friday.
war in Iraq was also happening, Alex. All right, so Rudy, you wanted to ask about 2012. So 2012 is
Yeah.
sort of a meme. It was the cumulation of this entire thing, of people being afraid of the end because they wanted a thing to point to, and the Mayan calendar ending was the thing they pointed to.
You remember that movie?
Yeah.
2009?
It
yeah.
had.
I
That
lived
fucking
through it.
dog shit movie?
The actual
There's
time.
No, we're
the
talking
only-
about the movie.
Oh gosh,
It was a
No.
masterpiece.
It was a masterpiece.
It's based
Yeah,
on
it
the
was
Mayan
great.
thing. But I'm saying I lived through that when that happened in real life. People were losing their freaking mind. They thought that the world was actually going to end. And the funniest thing is, it's not even the correct date. Somebody mistranslated when it was supposed to end.
Daylight savings and shit.
Bruh.
Yeah, they didn't take
Speaking-
daylight savings or leap years into account.
February
Oh
having
my
28
God.
days.
Speaking
We're
The
of-
like,
Mayans
That is
were
hilarious.
the Mayans
Bro-
had a very intricate dating and time system.
Real-
It
they
was more
didn't. They used
accurate
the
than the
sun.
Romans at the
They
time.
looked up in the
Recall.
sky and saw the
Speaking of
Base,
stupid
yeah,
idiots
Romans,
thinking
I
the
see that base.
guys, speaking of stupid idiots thinking the apocalypse was happening, do you know the recent solar eclipse?
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I've
What-
seen that. I've seen
One
it.
idiot
I've seen it.
Gave a massive tip to someone because they thought the world was ending. And then when the
No.
world
And they-
didn't
and they wanted it
end,
back.
they tried
His
to
net worth.
sue to get it back.
His net worth.
Thing.
That's
Uh,
right.
it's literally
Fellas,
just an
fellas,
eclipse.
listen.
That's another
Don't-
example of how just geological things enter into the societal conscious, and it becomes a basis for all sorts of stories. You end up seeing a lot of apocalyptic stories that are based around the solar eclipse happened and the world was destroyed.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm
Solar
going to write
eclipses are
I'm gonna
pretty
write a-
common. They happen basically once or twice a year, but only a single people basically end up seeing them at a time for almost a decade. And it just becomes a hallmark to that society of there are huge galactic, universal, celestial forces at work.
Yo,
We
Tio,
need to be wary of them.
what would you do if I wrote a post-apocalyptic story that spun off around the year 2020 and was called the Toilet Paper Revolution?
Attack of the Talking Toilets.
Captain Underpants sequels.
Yeah, Captain Underpants did it better. I can't top that. That's a masterpiece. My bad.
All right. So I think with that, we've covered most of the topics. I will get to my special D&D story time.
Here we go. Here
We
we
have
go.
almost everybody here who witnessed it for Monday night.
Oh boy.
Hey.
On a Monday.
Is there anything else we want to talk about with post-apocalypse?
Real quick.
Yes.
I
I
don't
just
think
want
so.
to mention very fast. I'm looking through my notes. That little short story, Ray Bradbury. It's called "There Will Come Soft Rains." That's what it's called. So if you wanted to look that up, it's a very depressing, horrific post-nuclear fallout. Everyone dies of radiation, cancer. But if you want to read it, it's called "There Will Come Soft Rains." I would say it's worth a shot, just to give you a little bit of perspective, because if there is a nuclear fallout, that's the reality. You're not going to be a badass. You're not going to be a cowboy bounty hunter. But give it a shot.
That's a good meme, actually. I should make that.
Go ahead.
You know what? To answer chat, yes, it is. So I play in several D&D games and tabletop games. One of them I play Monday night. We use a PAG's system that he's been developing here, Starsea. The actual game that we're playing is not in Starsea's setting, though. Another friend of ours, who's been on the show a few times, Shadow, he's the game master for it, and it's set in a Monster Hunter world. So while we're doing this Monster Hunter world, we are all going out on our first hunt together to prove our worth to the local tribe. My character, his name is Steed Bonnet. He's a bit of a nervous wreck. He's failed his manhood hunt trials twice before. This is his third and final attempt. So he's a little bit nervous, a little bit shaky. And one of the big things is he's been trying to impress a lady back at home. I hadn't personally picked which lady it was yet, but the Game Master Shadow knew about this, and we're going to pick it at the first party we had. So we go out, we have a hunt. It's a very successful hunt. And after we get back from killing these great beasts, we get to a party. And during the party, where characters are being introduced, and he puts on screen a local smith who's going to be making our armor for us. This girl named Ashley. I send a message to the Game Master, hey, I think Ashley would fit very well. She looks about the character's age, and the fact that she's working on his weapons and armor is something he would really appreciate, since he's wants to be more protected. The game master DMs me back. Awesome, sounds good. Before anything else happens, my friend Pag here, is there, and he says, "Hey, my character's, got the same last name as her. That's probably my sister, right?" So it's like, "Yeah, sure." So now it's like, "Oh, cool. I get to hit on his sister." Before anything else happens, our lovely friend James, who's been in the server, you've probably seen him around before, he says, "You know what? I have been tired of Pag. My character doesn't like his character, so I am going to bang his sister." Now, James is playing a strength character. He's got nothing in charisma. I'm playing a charisma character. I've got a lot of riz, and I'm really good at talking to people. So, yeah.
Riz master.
I am.
Yep.
So I go up and I start talking to this girl, Ashley. And things are going well. I'm playing my character nervous, and James then goes to the shadows. Is that, Pag's sister? And he's like, yes, that's his sister. So James says, I go up to use my strength to put myself in the conversation. So I role-played with James that he basically walked over, this big hulking guy, shoved me, the nerd, out of the way, and started talking to her instead. Obviously, she's not going to be super impressed by this. So she kind of was, not quite feeling it. And James decided, I need to do something to seduce her. I will win her honor. I will show her how strong I am. At this point, I was feeling dejected in-game, not in real life. I was loving this in real life. Feeling dejected. So I walked over to talk to my grandma and my younger cousins. Just, hang out with family members. James said, yeah, I'm going to prove to her with about his strength how great I am. He walks over to my character and he says, hey, we need to have a fist fight right now to prove that Ashley's worthy of it. My character's like, what are you talking about? Right now? And James says, yes. And he takes a swing and punches me in the gut and nearly kills my character. I get back up. I swing and hit him. I deal 0 damage because I have noodly arms because I'm a gunner, not a guy. And James punches me so hard in the head, it would have caused permanent brain damage and auto-crit killed me. So I'm on the ground bleeding out now. James is lucky that she walked away from this situation because she would have been completely upset by this. And he's turned around like, I thought I was strong. What happened? Why isn't she in love with me?
He immediately got a stack of infamy for that shit.
Yeah.
He's got to wait until they put him on a true crime podcast. Exactly. Then the girls will like.
But it's very funny because afterwards, Nebula here, his character came over and helped nurse mine back to health and take me to the local hospital. And it's funny that I'm sitting there. Yeah, I'm sitting there like, James, you literally did what every 90s bully does, where they shove them out of the way and then beat them up for the girl. It doesn't work at all. How would you do that?
I was just like, man, he really must be playing up this 90s bully moment. And then he was like, what? Why didn't it work? And I was like, huh?
No, my man is Biff. My man is Biff from
He's Biff Maxing.
Yeah, that's just
James, Alex Gomez in chat says
Go ahead.
Fellas,
TFW,
take
no Riz.
If you want to be a 90s baby, beat somebody up and steal their girl.
James,
this is how you get this is
it's we love you. I only share this because it's very, very funny. You might have a better shot at it.
This is Riz Master.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, another character, he took James's character aside and taught him a little bit of Riz, so he can now talk to girls without crapping his pants. In game, of course, in game.
You mean jizzing his pants?
Both. Yes.
What are you gonna do? Shit and come?
Yes. Will that impress you? Will that impress you, Ashley? And with that, I think it's a great time to call the podcast here. Thank you all so much for showing up. I really appreciate all the comments and the likes, and I appreciate DMTV's giving out those 10 memberships. Joining for a membership is only $1 right now, by the way. You get some really cool emotes, and I think with those 10 memberships, I get to add more emojis. So congratulations, everybody. Once that clicks through, we're going to start emoji maxing. So feel free to join the Discord, and I'll see you guys later. co-hosts. Would any of you like to say
Any,
Member
anything?
pill emoji Maxon.
Yes.
Any final plugs
One
from the
best.
fellas? Any plugs?
Look for my book that's going to be out
Subscribe to the
at the end of the
channel.
month.
I'd like to
Follow
plug my
me on
YouTube
Twitch.
channel that does
Tag's
not
book.
exist.
One at a
So,
time,
all right,
ladies.
guys. Yeah. So, Pag, go first.
Yeah, I've got another book coming out at the end of the month. It's actually a post-apocalyptic book, 15 years after the nuclear apocalypse, in a sort of urban fantasy type thing. Keep a lookout for it. It's going to be called Scion of the Void. I think it's pretty neat.
And I will be posting links to
I
that
am
when
the
it comes
author,
out
and I
in the
think I did a
server.
pretty good job.
Yeah.
Hey.
Pops, you have anything you want to promote?
No.
Excellent. Nebula, you want to promote your Twitch?
Yeah, twitch.tv/Nebula the Wanderer, all one. I do a lot of gaming content. I just finished downloading Fallout New Vegas, so post-apocalyptic shit will happen soon.
Make sure you get the New Vegas bounties mods.
Yeah, you're going to need
There's-
like hundreds of mods.
Yeah, I know. Gonna have to
Uh,
look into that shit.
Be careful. Willow is a great companion, but it was written at a time where people demanded that you have sex with all your companions. So randomly, as you're being friends with her, it gets to a point in the game where it's like, now you have sex with her. Okay, now you can go back to. having your
It's
normal
okay.
thing.
What do you mean? I've played Baldur's Gate 3. What are you talking about?
So here's the difference. Baldur's Gate 3
You act
has
like
a
that's not normal.
no. Baldur's Gate 3 has a I'm streaming this game. Don't show me boobies mode. Fallout New Vegas mods don't have that.
I see.
It's actually the opposite. They have show me more boobs.
They
Bigger
have it.
boobs.
We're gonna make sure to
Bigger!
dox your stream mode.
Well, the good news is that Twitch is actually okay with it as long as it's not like the main point of the stream or the main like thing of the stream.
There you go.
Like that was the thing about Baldur's Gate as well.
They're gonna
Get
abuse it,
you,
aren't they?
a little emotes of my face to put over the naughty bits. That way it'll be all right. And, Mr. Dez, or late old man as he is, would you like to plug anything?
I have literally nothing to plug.
Nah, nobody you want to plug? All right, excellent. I hate your friends too. Tio,
How
what
about
about you, my friend?
Tom?
No. If you want to hire me for an engineering firm in like 2 years, though, I'm open for that.
Hell yeah, bro.
All right, and Mr. Blackaroony, would you like to promote your channel, sir?
Yes.
So are you gonna do it?
Hell
Or
Yeah, what are you going to do, bud?
Oh.
You're going to...
you're just gonna leave it there? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would like to do that, actually. Why do you ask? What's the point?
I just wanted the awkward pause. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, by the way, Alex Gomez came from my channel. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you being here
Alex.
for me, for moi.
Alex
Yeah,
rules, bro. Shout out to Alex.
Yeah, just stay in this channel, by the way. This guy's got some great content, all right? So my channel, I'm not gonna be uploading for a while because I'm working on my Monarch video, which it's taking forever, and it's going to continue to take forever because
So plug
finding...
it, bro. So fucking plug it. That's the whole fucking point. Stop
hype.
talking for
The
fucking
whole,
15
the
minutes
whole
straight and
point of
fucking
plugging
say
is to
something.
like tickle,
I-
whatever, to get people excited. That's hype.
Okay, fine, it's
Hype it
coming
up.
out. It's
Hype it
coming
up.
out.
He is going to be making a video takedown of the Monarch series soon. If you've liked that series too much or just want to hear some fair criticisms about it, go subscribe to his channel. It's dropping sooner than you think. But
One more
Seriously
thing. one more
though,
plug.
that is my boy. So get
Yeah.
get your asses over there.
Yeah. One more thing. I wrote a short story that I will be uploading on my Patreon. If I can get it to
Ooh.
$5, like each individual subscription is $1, but if you get it to $5, I will turn it into a what's this thing called?
A longer short story?
No. I will adapt it. I will adapt
Pops, a
it
longer
into
short
a...
story is called The Story. Okay, I don't know if you know that.
Okay, I will
An
adapt it.
average
I will...
story.
Yeah, no. A
Let's
short
go
story
get-
is just a story. I will
Yeah.
adapt it to a horror story.
Just
That's
say
what I
the
will do.
name of your fucking Patreon.
Yeah.
It's just Blackaroony. It's just my name, okay? It's
All
just
right,
my name.
Patreon.com/Blackaroony.
Patreon.com/Bonerooney. Let's get some bones in chat going. While we do that, Astro,
Oh,
would you like to promote your channel?
shut up. Shut up. You shut your mouth.
Astro, you want to promote yourself?
Yes. I'm Amazing Astronaut. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I make videos about comics. Century 1 is coming up. Maybe this month, maybe next month, but a video will be coming out in the next, let's see what's this, 6 days for sure.
Excellent. So,
Shows the spread.
if you want some content, me and Astro did do a video covering fantasy comics. So, feel free to join us over there for that.
Yep.
All right. And with...
I hope everyone has a great night.
Yep, I think everyone should have a great
Thanks
night.
for joining us. You're the best. And remember, Scrumbo Jumbo.
Scrumbo Jumbo.